It is 4:10 p.m. This is March 20th, 2025. This is a joint meeting of the Bluff Town Council and Planning and Zoning. Let's do roll call, starting with Bluff Town Council.
Britt, Hornsby.
Luanne Hook.
Jennifer Davila.
Ann Leppanen, Linda Sosa's excused.
Erin Nelson serving as town manager.
Kristen Bushnell serving as permit technician.
And then Planning and Zoning.
Amanda Podmore, chair.
Marcia Hadenfeldt.
Brian Whitney. Gary Hawes.
Malia is here but stepped away from the table momentarily.
All right, then the first thing on the agenda, which is probably the singularly most important to all of us, is a review and discussion of Bluff's building department, permitting and inspection possibilities, discussion of responsibilities for land use clearance applications and site plan reviews, and review and discussion of drafting building regulations, Title IX. So I'm going to turn this over to Erin at this point.
Okay, so I think my plan, I'm gonna give us a little history of how we got here, spell out kind of the pieces that we still need to figure out and what's most timely. And then perhaps we can move into some of the document and can share the document and take a look at it. So, little history of how we got here. I would say this started way back in January of 2024, where I had conversations actually with Kristen Bushnell in her capacity as the San Juan County Planning Administrator, and we were talking about securing a building inspection interlocal agreement between Town of Bluff and San Juan County. So that never moved through, and it was never brought to the commission by the county administrator. It had popped up again late last year, but it just never got to the commission. It either wasn't a high priority for the administrator or the commission, but it just never was approved. And so we've had nothing on paper wherein San Juan County said that they were going to do any building permitting for Bluff.
So in 2020, I believe it was, Mac McDonald and I did an agreement that went to the San Juan County Commission that encapsulated the idea of what a building permit and inspection agreement would look like. Because right at that point, we've been operating since 2019 with a handshake from Scott Burton, who was then heading that process. And while that was working fine, Mac and I figured we should do what we're supposed to do, which is tighten up the interlocal agreement. And if everyone that was interested at that point remembers, a group of Bluff and non-Bluff residents went to the commission the day that it was to be presented and signed and tanked it because they were unhappy with how we zoned certain pieces of property. And I was told by the commission at that point that I could take this back to Bluff and rezone properties after we'd initially done our zoning. That did not happen. So we had worked up to this point, luckily with Scott Burton, who was cooperative, Kristen Bushnell has been amazing, but that needed to happen, so thank you.
Yeah, so we never had anything on paper. Then in early February, San Juan County's building inspector gave his notice that he was no longer going to be in that role, which resulted in the county indicating that they didn't have the capacity to do the building permitting portion of it. So that kind of created an emergency situation where there's no authority who's going to issue building permits. Clearly, this is a health and safety issue. So that's when we started hardcore working on getting a building department created for Bluff. So that included, as of Tuesday night, the town council unanimously approved hiring Kristen Bushnell as our building permit technician and Corey Coleman as our building official. And in that building official role, he is the building inspector with commercial and residential qualifications. So the permitting technician position is going to assist Corey because he is stretched between Grand County, San Juan County. He is one of the only qualified folks. So in terms of I'll use the paper pushing and just getting things organized and approved, we need to make sure he's able to do his job really quickly and efficiently, which is where Kristen's position comes into play. But this leaves us with just a couple more things we need to iron out. So first and foremost, we need to have a building code that gives Town of Bluff the authority to issue building permits and spells out who has the responsibility to administer, to sign and stamp all of that stuff. So we need that authority. So that's where this building code is going to come in. In talking with legal counsel, other municipalities, Kristen and her official duties, it doesn't need to be a building code of dozens and dozens of pages. It just needs to give us the authority on paper to have the positions and issue the stuff. If we are referencing Utah building code, that is encapsulating all of the legal technical requirements that need to be in the building code. So number 2, the council needs to finalize the master fee schedule so we can assess the fees. There was a public hearing on Tuesday night. As of this time, we haven't received any verbal or written comment regarding that master fee schedule, but we have up until Friday, March 28th to receive written public comment. It is on our agenda today and should be talked about because we don't want to create a system, and I know planning and zoning, you guys are great, but just to catch you up to speed, town can't generate revenue. We should be able to cover cost. So we're not charging crazy fees, but we need to be able to cover our admin. Number 3, we need to find a solution to administratively handle the building permit items that are town code specific versus building code specific. Because what the council passed, and rightfully so, because we're in an emergency situation, what they have passed is we have people who are qualified to follow Utah building code. But the items that we would receive in a building permit that would address like setbacks, dark sky ordinance, building height, those are all town specific and are not tied into like the legal requirements for a building person. And to be frank with you, like what was assigned and what was kind of covered in this initial like, okay, let's just get these folks in, doesn't really handle that side of our town administration. So a potential solution, and again, we'll get into all this, a potential solution is some kind of like administrator role, like a planning administrator role to kind of cover that stuff. Because this leads to, we've got very tight turnarounds for building permitting. If we get a permit, we have 14 days legally to review it and approve it if it's complete. That doesn't leave enough time typically for planning and zoning to meet and look it all over. The other big piece of this too is that if you all have written the codes and you're very happy with the codes, all of it's very spelled out. And so unless there was some weird variance or something completely missing, technically like this is an administrative checkoff potentially. And then I got 2 more. We need to draw a distinct line between the building department's responsibilities and planning and zoning's responsibilities. And administration might be able to help us do this. And then 5, once we have that line of duties, we can work together to clean up our ordinances and codes to ensure that the right department, the right role is identified in those ordinances and gives them the authority to sign off on everything. So since we have limited time tonight, my 3 things that I do want to hit would be, let's take a quick look at that building code ordinance, because I know a lot of you have been in there and have been making comments. 2, determine if the land use clearance process is going to be repetitive of the building permitting process. And if it is, let's find a solution or a direction that we're going to go to kind of combine those into one document for the applicant. I don't want our applicants to be filling out the exact same information 2, 3, 4 times if they're trying to do a development. And then 3, that master fee schedule later on in the agenda, we need to make sure all of these pieces are tying back to that and we aren't charging excess money if we are truly moving down into like one permitting kind of system. Okay, that was a lot. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen, but please start the conversation while I move over to that building code. And I will say for our new permit technician, is there anything that you felt like I missed? Because we are really relying on Kristen to kind of bring a lot of this together.
There's been one thing we covered earlier. In the very real near future, there's not going to be a conflict of interest, and so I know there's a little bit of an in-between right now. But just know that other things are moving, and Corey's about your only building inspector in a 200-mile radius right now. So him and I just saw an easy easy solution here for Bluff, and we went for it. And so we're gonna revisit it every 4 months, reevaluate where we're at, what we need. But that's where we're at right now.
And just one last thing, I think it is important too, if you all haven't already heard me say this, like, this is one of those processes that we should be able to execute for the people who live and own land in Bluff. Like, this is a process that, you know, it's good that we're owning it. We don't want this to go up to the county level if we have the ability to handle it in-house. So I see this as a very positive thing. And, you know, for Kristen right now in dual roles, I really do see a distinction in, you know, this is town of Bluff stuff. This is not county stuff. And so I'm less concerned about that, given that we're just gonna go ahead and move this entire ball of opportunity into the town.
And so Kristen, right now, correct me if I'm wrong, there are no pending applications that are sitting out there up at the county. So it's what's in the system, that's been paid for and has a permit, that'll keep going in the San Juan County system. But anybody who didn't get their permit and paid their money down here, they're coming to us.
Correct. So just on the record, because there might be one or two, we lost the building inspector on February 2nd. So at that time, we shuffled everything to Bluff, and we're still in the process of picking up those pieces on the flip side. Anybody who has paid for a building permit with the county has a duty to follow that through the life of the project. So the county will be hemorrhaging those fees out because we're on a contract with Johnson DeMille right now. So they will cover the life of that project for inspections, and we will be starting a very clean slate of, from this point forward, the town of Bluff will be covering it. So it's not an ideal time because everybody's ramping up for building season and want to do subdivisions and want to do all this stuff. So it's not ideal. We are hustling as fast as we can.
And then just to kind of get timelines out there, given that this is aligning with the master fee schedule, aligning with bringing on employees, it would be our goal to probably have this ordinance really cleaned up in the next week. So Bluff's town council meeting is on April 1st. So that's what we're looking at.
It's an appropriate day. April Fool's Day.
We're all fools, it's fine.
Marcia, did you have your hand up? Did you? No.
Maybe, but I don't know. It was gonna be really good.
I just want to say that it's awesome that we have the expertise in town. You know, it's like there's one of everything that we need, and so we're glad that you're here and can help.
I think what I just wanted to say is the idea is, in the end, Bluff will have a building department. So everything that we look at here, when we go through this, is the idea of what can happen in town and who should do it. And it's pretty, forget counties and anyone else associated. Everything we do today on these papers should be, what do we want in town on our own. We're growing up.
Feel like we just delivered twins. So I think rather than trying to raise hands, if people just want to talk, and then if it gets burdensome, we can go to asking for the floor. But I think for the purposes of moving through this, if you've got something to say, just say it and not on top of somebody else's group.
Alrighty, so I think probably makes sense. I think this is at like a 3-4 page document, so it's still a little digestible. Maybe we can just kind of start moving through and do a time check here in maybe 15-20 minutes. I guess I will start with, before we move into this, any other questions, concerns, items regarding anything that we just talked about? Clarifications.
Do we know if it's really happening, as in the town thinks the budget will work to make all of this come to fruition?
Yes, I'll just forego my trip to the Bahamas with
Oh,
the money.
darn, okay.
Yes. No, it's in the budget. That one of the unfortunate reasons that it's in the budget is that we have positions we haven't been able to fill, like a paid bookkeeper and a paid note taker. So we're good. Erin is very dogmatic about keeping us focused on the budget, so we're okay.
And could I just interject real fast? So our fees, we looked at what Bluff has been doing. Bluff doesn't see the economic downturns that most of the world does. We've been pretty steady. So regardless of what's going on out there in the wide world, it seems like it's been pretty steady. And so Corey and I based our time commitment and fees on the estimated, if nothing changes, accepting the county current fee schedule into the town of Bluff fee schedule, so that nothing changes, boots on the ground. We adjusted our rates to fit that. So town should be breaking zero every year, which is how a building department should be. And so just know that's where that came from for our rates and for the fee schedule rates.
Okay, excellent.
And
Thank you for that.
One of our meetings, Jen had a good point that it's a service to people in Bluff, that you can go ahead and start projects and you don't have to wait, you don't have to search for a building inspector and that kind of thing. So it was, the money was sort of justified as that, as a service back to the community.
Alrighty, so, I did have a proposed edit here to get some clarity regarding when San Juan County indicated that they didn't have the capacity, and that was really when their building inspector gave his notice, so that's there. Moving down to definition, I know we got like a lot of comments, a lot of them are mine. So, under definitions, I do think it is important that we've got definitions all in one place. So what I would ask is, as we're moving through this, if there is something that is not defined, let's make sure that we have a section for that. And then if we can have a check before this is sent to town council as a final draft, a check, Kristen and potentially Amanda, as to are these aligning to state code, or if, you know, if for some reason we do need an alternative definition that's entered and the reason why it doesn't align to the state code. But for the most part, I agree with Kristen, it is gonna be state code, and I agree with Luanne that, yes, we do need it in place for our citizens to be able to see. Looks like, oh, that's what I added as defined. I've got some of the stuff moved over from the other thing is we have things that are already defined in our zoning code, our actual zoning, Town of Bluff zoning code, and I just have moved those over. So just as a reminder for folks, as we're updating both, we might need to update both. And then this definition might need to go away completely if we determine that a land use clearance application is no longer needed. So just hold on to that as we're moving this down. We've got owner builder. One thing that I didn't find super well defined in any of our stuff is like a remodel versus a renovation versus I've got another R in there somewhere, reconstruction. So zoning, can you give me some background? Because clearly building permits are very applicable to people doing renovations in their house. From an electrical, plumbing, structural standpoint.
And because we're a planning, like a land use planning body, we typically didn't deal with that because
didn't.
that was building permit. So
Gotcha.
we didn't define that further. I see a need for that.
And it did become a difficulty, sorry.
I think we do classify like what counts as a building permit, as we discussed earlier. Like at what point do you cross over into needing a building permit? Typically, it's if you're doing electrical, plumbing, or laying foundation, or anything over 200 square feet. So a shed out back.
But if you want a
Maybe we
light
don't
bulb in,
care.
but if you want a light bulb in the shed?
So we need to
Yes.
we need to really define like at what point do you cross over to needing a building permit?
And like putting in a dark sky fixture,
No,
you know, there's electrical and then there's
When we
electrical.
talk about porches and decks or re-roofs, well, if they're not taking off the OSB off the roof, you're not
Right.
changing it into ventilation or anything, just let them do it. But if they're changing it structurally and putting in more vents or whatever, then that kind of crosses that line, so.
I agree with Erin, though, that there needs to be definition because I think it's tripped us up. And I know, I will speak personally, I thought a remodel is, I mean, I thought no building permit was just putting siding on something that, you're doing. Well, wait a minute, is that structural because they changed the structure? I didn't change the shape or, so defining may be important, and the title could be remodel, and then A, reconstruction, B, remodel, C, so that anyone looking gets the right line and goes, oh, that's the one I'm doing. I'm just putting the side on and I'm just putting the lights in, so that would help maybe. Maybe it's an ABC. Okay.
I would add, like, roofing, roofs,
Yeah.
and patios have been gray areas
Yeah.
that we could maybe define further.
Okay.
Porches.
So I'm hearing that we need some additional definitions, and then I'm also hearing we need a portion in the body of the document which specifically says, at this point, it kicks to building permit.
I think the easier way to do it is to say projects that are exempt. So we say, you can do all of this without a permit.
Gotcha, okay.
And anything not on that list has to kick over to permit.
So I'm gonna
That
make you
is
guys.
the right way. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, building permit required versus exemptions. So I've got it just a couple listed down here. So this, I'm gonna just write a note, this area needs work.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Then this will then move back into if it doesn't need a building permit and it is just a simple sign off and someone has a question, or if they're doing something that doesn't require the building permit, but does require land use approval, who is going to be that approving body?
I'm not sure that you would have any of those.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because what, land use for a shed?
yeah.
But that's the thing, is that planning and zoning is really well grounded in the zones, whereas somebody that's doing the building permit isn't necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, a small shed that violates the setbacks would be, I think, the example of something that would need a land use clearance that doesn't need a permit.
I think you still need one, and then pass that to the building department.
So what I'm hearing is that pretty much almost everything is going to kick into a building permit.
No.
Well,
Well, let me rewrite that. Sorry. So building permits are required for more things than land use is going to look at.
Right.
But in the very rare instance, there might be just one little thing that has to run by land use that doesn't need a building permit.
If you're changing the footprint, you go to land use. If you're putting something on the ground, you're using the ground. But there's other stuff that you don't need a land use that you need the building permit.
we went into great depth in this when we made like our latest planning and zoning kind of cheat sheet or flow chart. And the only things we've listed is not necessarily needing a building permit, but requiring a land use clearance only for moving a single RV, tiny house on wheels, mobile home, or other structure unit for occupation onto land when a building permit will not be required. So if in some way foundation utilities were already in and somebody was just moving a large structure, and that was the only case we came up with that didn't need an they only needed an LUC.
And I mean, even with that, you're probably gonna need an inspection done. to
Yeah,
Set
so-
it on the foundation and everything. Even if everything's in place, you're gonna need somebody to look at the electrical.
Yeah, so maybe we just say anything that needs that would have needed an LUC needs a building permit.
It seems to me that if we have a process where someone fills out an application and says, hi, my name's Susie and I'm going to do this, then they walk into the building department. The building department then clicks off on it and goes, oh, you just need a shed with no light bulbs and no plumbing? Have at it, as long as you meet just read the setbacks 25 feet. We don't have to see that. Neither does the building department. The building department at front desk becomes a front desk of information and knocks so much of it out of the park without worrying about it.
Well, and that's where these exempt buildings, unless somebody like calls them in, hey, my neighbor's building a shed and it's right on the property line, then would go out and say, hey,
You messed
But
up.
I think a lot of those smaller things, pergolas, and that would also fall into this, like, we don't need a building permit for
So the cheat sheet you were talking about, is that something that could be modified, that could be actually incorporated in either in the materials that people get or in the ordinance itself, so that?
Isn't it online? I
Yeah,
think
it's
on our
online, so we would
website.
update it, cause it has the nice table in it that shows like if you're in what zone, what your setbacks are, and so, yeah, we would just update it with the new ordinance.
And I would probably ask that as you're developing a lot of your other applications, that you're either you're performing those edits or working with planning and zoning to do those edits.
Right. Well,
So
there'll be,
let's give it a first run at what's
Yeah.
exempt, and then
Okay.
bring it back, because I don't want to get hung up on just that.
yeah,
Excellent. And then, given that you have the background in that stuff, I'm gonna ask you to go in and make some modifications or suggestions as to how to get those exemptions done. We have a question here, do we need a definition for a structural change, or does structural definition cover it?
the big answer is yes. I think it's one of the most confusing lines in the whole thing is what is a structural change? And we all picture what we think it is, but then we're doing something we're not supposed to, or vice versa, we're doing more than we need to. So I'm not, there must be a legal definition of structural change. I don't know.
Kristen, you're
I bet
tasked with that.
IBC's got it.
Excellent. Okay. Utah, so the big thing is that we are referencing Utah State Construction Code. Is that the right way to say
I
it?
believe it's Utah State Building.
Building.
Building code. Okay, so let's make that change. Thank you.
And that would go for the whole document.
Yeah. Building code. And then we are essentially trying to reference always the most recently adopted one through the state of Utah, and that should encompass everything so we don't have to go and make edits all the time. Okay. Any additional, I have just like a lot of stuff, like do we need to reference any of our other exterior lighting documents? And just for the sake of kind of moving along, I'm thinking that this is going to stand alone and we might end up, yeah, and that way we can keep our potential admin person on their documents and we can keep building people on their documents.
There was something in here that, I think, Kristen, I think you asked if, put it all in here, or I think it needs at least a link to the Utah building code, or just put it right in there.
Well,
But-
I agree
but
with
at
your
least a
con-
link.
I like having everything, even though it makes the document longer, I like it all right.
Because somebody who's coming in to see what they need to do, they can just click on it, they don't have to wonder if they've found the right thing. Is this the one you're talking about? Is this the one? So if it can't be all right here, which it changes, so I think maybe a link would be the best, so that it stays current.
I'm definitely comfortable with the link. I hear definitely both perspectives, and I hear like it is really easy just to pull up. But I'm also worried, I feel like some of our ordinances, because they're 36 pages, people don't want to go through it all. And in this particular instance, like they don't want to go through 80 pages to just get to that one section about what they're doing for their electrical. So if you're okay, I think a link makes sense.
Yep.
Will that go in the definitions or down lower?
I think,
Right there where K is,
yeah, like right at the front, so that,
just
When
write the
you're-
word, yeah, just write add link, there you
And
go.
then under
Yeah.
your general provisions, say there's a link to the Utah.
yeah, somewhere at the very front, I would say, just so
Yeah,
you can click
And
on
I
it
think that's
right
the
away.
reason that the draft we got from our attorney is so short. He did not want to make it 40 pages long because people aren't, they're going to
You
get
don't read it.
frustrated. So the link is a good idea.
And then the link stays current, you don't have to say, ooh, they just updated this and stick another cut and paste in.
Making folks online dizzy. I'm thinking, so we'll include it in the definition there, and then it would probably also just be a link on our website that's coupled with this ordinance once it's passed. And that way it's front and center, but it's also in the body of the text.
I'm also nervous, sorry, this is an architecture thing, say it once, say it right. If we have definitions here and they're the same, it makes me nervous that, okay, we updated this one and we got that ordinance passed, but then this one's out of date. And so maybe just a grander thing to think about is where do we keep all of our definitions in one glossary for the town of Bluff and remove that from each ordinance section?
Intern. Maybe our intern wants to develop this for us.
It makes me nervous when, even if it's 2 months behind the last one, that they're conflicting
So you're saying that this building ordinance will have the definition of the word structure, and our zoning code would have the word structure and definition, so you want it all in glossary of terms over here?
I think there's two ways to do it. You can either do it per chapter, per section, like this is a chapter on zoning, this is a chapter on building. But due to possibilities of missing something and conflicting, I would just have like town definitions, and everything is on that definition sheet, wherever that's housed, and you pull definitions out of each section of your ordinances.
And do you know how that would work in terms of especially updating it, like legally, what that would look like?
See, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Marcia.
I like it in the ordinance because of just that. So if the building ordinance is updated, and when it is, we go, shed isn't a shed, it's a structure, then we fix the definition up above in this chapter, and someone looking at the instructions under shed just goes up the page to the word shed, as opposed to having to open now a glossary somewhere else where it might not have gotten changed.
Yeah, that's what I would think. You know, certainly when we get this all put together, it's gonna go to our attorney anyway, and if we have a list of questions at that point. Otherwise, he's pretty good about redlining and telling us where to move it to.
Well, and I guess if you were updating definitions and we had to change something in planning, you would just re-amend. both
Search for
sections.
them all and, I think that reference to Utah Building Code needs to be in the intent and purpose of the ordinance, because you start to reference it in C, where it says the adoption and enforcement of building regulations is important for the preservation of public health, safety, and welfare, and then just say we have adopted the Utah Building Code right there at the top, with the link right there, that these are the things that we do for health, safety, and public welfare is right there.
So add it as like a item D or add it to C?
D makes it stand out a little better, I guess, but yeah, I think I just got a new category myself.
I
Town
am
of
going
Bluff.
to, can I assign this to someone to add this?
Add the hyperlink.
Add,
Add the sentence and the link.
connection to Utah State Building Code. Who wants that?
I can do it.
Amanda, fantastic, thank you. All right, excellent. So it looks like we probably need some more work on definitions and just getting all these in one place. Thank you to Malia for sending me the link to the new House State bill that defines some additional stuff for a building official. So I've moved some of that in there, and then that's in the definition of a qualified building official or building official. Got it changed here to the building code, have some more stuff here. And then answering Marcia's question, Utah State Construction/Building Code incorporates the International Building Code in its requirements. Kristen, I assume that's a yes, but can you confirm?
So basically, the state of Utah takes the International Building Code, which is not really international, it's just the US. And adopts it and then adds some more things, like for the state of Utah, seismic is important. So they add.
Great.
And I
Different things just for our area.
Yeah, and I think the only thing, or I shouldn't say the only thing, I think one of our early discussions was about Utah State Building Code having like really strong need for like snow load and stuff like that, which down here might not be as applicable, but I do think that it is going to be more specific to us than the international, and it has some additional stuff. Comfortable with that? Kristen's nodding her head for folks online. Okay, Marcia, do you mind? I'm going to go ahead and resolve. I'm going to resolve this, and also.
I just want to make sure we're covering it.
Yeah, Malia's answered this as well. All looking good. I'm resolving this one. Yeah.
One down.
One down. Good work. Okay.
Look how much shorter the
Excellent.
document already is.
so we have the building official. We have the building official's powers and duties. Two ways we can look at this. One, we can just create either just like a job description, but I do think that given kind of the purpose of this is to give the town the authority to do this role, that it's probably good that this is spelled out. Thoughts, concerns, additions? Marcia?
Perhaps we should be saying the building department is authorized to.
Okay.
Because the building department is Kristen assigning the inspector to go do something or to, is that
There's
true?
some legalities here. I think it does need to remain the building official.
Okay,
I am basically operating under a lot of Corey's certificates and licenses as a helper,
okay,
right? But he actually has the license for that authority versus just the building department. And where those were newly outlined for building official regulations, I think we need to keep it as there is one building official that we follow.
The legislature was really specific with that, was saying you have to have this designation in here.
okay,
And so since he meets all the criteria and Kristen doesn't,
okay.
Yeah, otherwise you get somebody in the office who says something to somebody, they
And-
build on that fact, and then they
It
get
wasn't a
caught.
fact, okay, that's fine, I just, because we're in flux, I was trying to let her do everything, or let them do everything.
Kristen has added some suggestions, including like the certificate of occupancy, which I totally agree with. And then looks like inspect construction. Yeah, cool. We can definitely make that change. What else, Kristen and or other folks familiar, should go in this? Are there additional text items that like should be added to this section to give us the authority to do this? Or give the building official the authority to do this?
I am betting, and I could be totally wrong, I'm betting there's a catch-all phrase at the end that says, and any other legally permitted, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And we might just ask Chris or look at some other ones to see, but there must be a catch-all.
And then my note was,
Permissible by law.
permissible. My note on that was the idea that, are we going to have the building official come to P and Z when something's happening? So we talked a little bit this morning in trying to eke that or, figure that out. So if the building official check marks everything and is done, signs off on it, boom, the house is built. P and Z should never have to see that. But once there is a question or challenge, are we asking that the building official become staff to P and Z and answer our questions? Or are we just sticking with the developer in question?
I mean, as the permit tech, I would have a lot of the background knowledge of what had transpired in application, and here's our notes and blah, blah. Again, Corey's pretty stretched, so I think I would be the representation there with said applicant.
And is that something we should assign? In other words, should one of these lines be, are we JKL or whatever, be, report to,
Yeah.
interacting with P and Z as needed? Okay, that's great, that's,
And I think, Marcia, that gets to a bigger organizational question that has been coming up frequently with Erin and myself and now with Malia. It's like, okay, we're gonna have a building department, we've got a roads department, we have an airport manager, we have all these things, and we've never defined any kind of standard operational procedure as to when do we expect the airport manager to come to a meeting? Or
Yeah.
how do we get updates on what Michael Havakin is doing? So I think that this kind of fits into, this may force the next level of putting those operational procedures together. But I think it's a really good question.
yeah, absolutely. All of a sudden, we have staff. A real town has staff who reports to the meetings. Your staff would come to the town council and say, tonight's report from the airport is this. And our staff would come in and go, tonight's report from the building department is this.
And it might not be that somebody's here all the time, like if we're just
Right.
recording, here's a list of building permits this month,
No,
that's probably just an agenda item that
Yep.
the chair can cover, but if it gets dicey in any way, we'll be here.
I just want to pause for a second. Jen has a comment. Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a comment because is this something that we required the county to do when they were issuing building permits? Because I don't think that it is, and I can see this holding things up and back in the construction process.
are you,
Whereas, you know, having to have the building officials go to the planning and zoning meetings.
oh, no, Jen, I just meant if something was wrong. In other words, no,
Oh,
they don't,
okay.
they don't come to us with everything, absolutely, it takes a
Okay.
whole bunch off our plate.
Yeah.
They're bringing something to us when there is a question or a challenge or something that needs to be decided.
Well, and I think it's more of an after the fact thing, like, okay, here's the building permits we granted, like they're already out.
Yep.
Right.
So it's not holding anybody up, but everybody's aware this is happening.
This was given to
Yeah,
so-and-so,
no,
and
no,
this
no.
is in
That-
process.
But it's a quick, like, one pager, the end of the meeting, we go.
And you don't, and just like you just said, you don't necessarily have to show up. Just submit it to the chair will read it. If she goes, whoa, I got lots of questions on this one, then you have to show up at the meeting. But Jennifer, I do not want the P and Z, the building official at every meeting. We just need him when there's a problem.
All right, good conversation. Thank you all. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm not gonna resolve this one yet, but I think that we'll kind of keep coming back to this like conversation between, and maybe that's just defined in like our internal processes and procedures. But this'll of course be taken out when we get to the final draft. Right of entry, hearing from Kristen that this seems really open. So this definitely came like directly from our lawyer. So if there are areas that we can add to make this more clear, I think that makes sense. I wonder, like, by accepting a land use clearance or building permit, the permittee agrees to XYZ. I wonder if that goes on the actual application itself as opposed to in our ordinance, because the ordinance is gonna spell out, we have the authority to do XYZ. And then the permittee says, I understand in order to receive my permit, I have to abide by XYZ. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then opening it back up, other folks' thoughts in terms of the level of detail for this, because this is a big one, that, you know, the individual is allowed to go on private property. So I don't know what folks have seen in other municipalities at the county level, or if we have anything that we can draw upon to like beef this up. It did come from our attorney, so I assume it's like semi-okay.
With my comment, I was just looking for, like, maybe adding language of what merits us to come on your property versus we're coming on your property because we think something's up. And
Okay.
so that's where I said, has there been a complaint to the fire marshal or the health department or another authority? Or like, at what point do you pull that trigger of, okay, we're coming to investigate versus just anything is open to investigate?
And usually those things, those departments, state level, or wherever, they tell you a certain amount of notice. Like, will you be here? Usually they require 30 days or something, you know, but something like that. So you don't have, you can't barge onto property and get shot at or whatever, you know.
I've
You want
also-
to protect them, and you want to have that proper notice to somebody that they have a question, and you can probably resolve it.
Sorry. You just show up as Jennifer.
I'm just wondering, I think that if you're having this, there's some kind of legal, some kind of legal question. And I don't think you can wait for a 30-day notice to do
No.
something like this. If you see something that's happening that's jeopardizing someone or something like that, I think you need the ability to enter a job site immediately to red tag and shut down. I don't
But
think,
is it-
I don't think that it warrants a 30-day notice.
It's, in my mind, it's really similar to what you do when you're renting your property out to a tenant. You have the right to enter the property. If possible, and it's not an emergency, you get 3 days written notice. But if it's an emergency, even in the middle of the night, you have the right to enter. We can ask Chris to tighten that up a little bit.
Is
But,
this just a construction site, or is it in anyone's home?
Yeah, see, that's my question, because
Yeah,
I'm
that's where
assuming
that
it's
was too
anybody's
old.
house for, like, any time of day, just, I'm coming in.
No, so during construction, building department has the right to go. You're gonna go and go,
And that's
what the
usually
heck do you
on-
think you're
It's
putting
usually
in here?
on the permit.
Right.
But when we grant them the certificate and the building permit, it states at the bottom this.
Okay,
You know, we will be on your property, whether we call you beforehand or not to inspect things.
right.
yeah, there's actually a number of examples that are too lengthy to bother reading, but, you know, if the building official has reasonable cause to believe a code violation exists, and that
Right.
goes on.
Right.
And I think we can look at this type of notice. And it also differentiates between occupied and unoccupied buildings. So I think there's.
There you go.
It should be
Okay.
probably more spelled out than what we have.
I like Amanda's addition with before a certificate of occupancy is issued, because it could even be somebody that hasn't gone to get a building permit and they might need one. And so we need someone before that, they have that document in hand that the building official is allowed to go onto the property.
Well, they're not getting a certificate of occupancy, they're not doing,
No,
that's your final.
But I've added that to say, to address Luann's question of, the inspector can't go onto anybody's property at any point in time, we're saying,
Once you have your
up,
certificate of
up until
occupancy.
you get your,
they can.
your CO, like,
And that's where it's like, okay, it's good, now you're in the clear from us bombarding your property, because we already gave you a check off.
Okay. Alrighty,
Erin, can I ask one more
oh,
clarification?
please.
Just if, later on, if we're discussing a planning administrator, would that go right above this right of entry section? It would be the same, like, power of duties thing?
That's a good question. Cause I'm seeing a planning administrator is gonna be less about the building code and more about administrative functions. But if they're going to like measure setbacks or going on a property for, I guess the way I'm,
I would put it in your zoning, your planning and zoning code.
yeah. Less about building, more about zoning.
Duties of the administrator.
Yeah.
But they're
Okay.
not part of P and Z? Like, they're not part of the
No.
commission?
no. A planning official is not planning and zoning commission at all.
So what do they do?
They do, they,
Doing what? So,
Whatever we want.
Okay, that's not the first time I've heard that.
This came up in our meeting earlier today, where the fact that each building permit will have some land use things need to be signed off on. And instead of that, having to wait for a planning and zoning meeting and have us sign off as a commission, because we can only sign things as a commission, we can't sign things as individuals. We'll delegate that authority to a separate planning administrator.
and it
it wouldn't be
may,
the building.
well, it may be the same person in the end with regard to how we structure the department, this building, this
This literally just
imaginary
came up
building.
this morning where we're like, oh.
You know,
So we're
so,
still working through it, and I think Erin and I just got done, sorry, that's why I was late, with the table as we go here that
Yeah.
might
you'll see the
differentiate the
duties
lanes.
are, there are definitely duties for everyone.
Okay, so just like a quick time check here, we're coming up on the hour. But this is like our, sorry, my most important thing, so sorry. We got red tag stuff, feeling okay about that. I'm seeing that folks have added some language down here. And then what we're seeing, okay, and then the enforcement officer imposes penalties. So twofold, the building official definitely is the one who's able to say, there's a code violation here, stop. And if we do adopt a master fee schedule that had fines associated with it, I would say that that individual would do that at the same time. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
So then going back up, can someone go add under the official's duties that they are able to assess penalties to code violations? Amanda might be on it, possibly.
I'm not, sorry.
We got Malia typing.
Say, you guys are all in here at the same time, and I so appreciate it.
So
Okay,
how does that tie into like an inspector? So say the inspector comes in,
same person.
That
And so-
is, that's
Okay,
the
so they
building.
find that something is wrong,
Right.
don't they just correct it and
They-
redo it and make it
Right,
right?
they stop the work and say, correct this, you have whatever,
Because you
2
have the
weeks.
inspection, I'm just, what would be the process of the steps? Say you come in and this didn't get done right, so you call whoever did it back and they do it right, but then they also get fined? They don't just
Well,
correct it?
stop work orders are usually associated with people who don't have a building permit. So the building inspector, in this case Corey, would come in. I would probably draft a letter first and say, hey, you don't have a building permit, please come visit with us within 2 weeks. If they do not visit with us in 2 weeks, we send Corey out into the field to literally put a stop work order on the door. And at that point in time, they would be assessed for a fine. But you have to give people a shot.
At doing
Like,
it
you
right.
know, you have to give them a fair shot to correct it, and then if they don't, then you can fine.
Okay, so
That's
it's
the big
not-
one, is no permit. But then there could be an actual miss.
Your
work-
electrical wiring
it
is
didn't
not
happen.
good, and, yeah.
But
So
then
stop.
don't they just correct that, or you fine them and then they still have to go get the guy back and correct
We
it?
wouldn't be fining at
No.
that point in time.
Yeah,
The
okay,
building
that's good.
inspector would be working with them to correct it and get it right before they could move forward.
Finding is when you break the rules. And the rules are,
Okay, and that's
the
just what
rules
seems.
are, you screwed up a little bit, but you got time to fix it.
And you know that you broke the rules.
Okay, so but
Yeah,
what are you
that's true.
adding
Yeah.
to the, you were adding something to the top?
So, bringing that all together.
Yeah, thank you.
We are gonna need that under, violations at the bottom. I got violations down here somewhere, I think. I thought, potentially. Maybe not. But if we have,
I found it.
It's at the end, isn't it?
sorry, there it is. Didn't go quite far enough. So under violations, we're putting something in there to explain the process and spell it out. And then I'm not sure if that higher up section that we just looked at needs to reference that violations, especially for the stop work order, given the severity. But perfect, explaining the process here. So that needs work. I don't think we have time to go over it, but Kristen, can we make sure that we get that in there? We do talk about permitting fees, and it's passed by council from time to time. That's kind of standard language. Going back up, sorry. So building permit required. This was not in from Chris. So I feel like this area might need to be tightened up a little bit to just explain, because there was nothing about the actual building permits themselves. Is everyone comfortable with us like adding that section and kind of explaining?
Yeah.
Yes.
that? Okay, excellent.
Definitely.
And then I'm going to, or someone, can you make a comment, this needs work? And
Sorry,
then,
under building permit required?
Yes.
yeah, just, this needs
What
work.
did you just say? Sorry,
Yep.
what did you just say?
Oh, just someone needs to go in and add a little bit to this section. Now, under application, we've run into a lot of, I don't want to say issues, but we've run into some issues with planning and zoning where the ordinance says one thing, but the application has different fields filled out. I like the idea of condensing this to just say there is an application. Given that it's super technical, the application will spell out what fields are needed, and this document just says there's an application, you gotta fill it out, and then you gotta pay your fees. Is everyone comfortable with that?
Agreed.
So
Yeah,
this
that's
section we're gonna kind of get rid of. Okay, and then the application is what Kristen is developing right now. We got permit fees, we've got exemptions. Again, this area needs work, all in caps, but that's gonna go to building code spelling that out. Then we've got owner builder limitations. This one's really, really important. A lot of this is delegated by Utah state law. So same thing, do we just reference it? Do we spell it all out? Kristen, maybe you can get in here and say,
I like having it all in one place.
okay, so you're okay with this one, especially,
It just
it
means
comes up a
we're probably
lot.
gonna have to update it every year.
Yeah. So consideration, but this does happen in Bluff a lot, which is why I wanted to make sure it is spelled out here. Okay. Then we've got occupancy, or certificate of occupancy, if we might change the wording there. Then we're down to some violations, and violations are, like, violations and penalties for are very common in most municipalities and most counties, because there does need to be some kind of, it's a problem if you're not doing this to code. So that's why that is suggested there. Then we've got enforcement, and most of the enforcement, again, is going through the building official. But let's make sure that all of this is tying to our master fee schedule, as well as what we are authorizing the building official to do. And that's the end of the document.
My one suggestion would be to put exemptions at the very top. I think that's pretty common in stuff so that. you don't-
Exemptions of,
Of what's required under a building permit, because you go through all these things and then they say, ooh, I'm exempt. So you just put it up at the top, you're only exempt if, and then if you don't meet those, then you read the rest.
We could put it in this document. I think we're gonna want that maybe a little more fluid for the first little bit here. Maybe eventually we put it into this document, but we're not gonna know until we come upon them. And so I think we have that maybe on the building permit application, which can be a more fluid document, like, okay, we need to adjust this. And then eventually add it in here once we have it a little more solid.
no, I don't necessarily want it at the top of this, but maybe it's at the top of the application.
Yeah,
You
So
do
when you
not have to
walk
fit,
in
you
and-
do not have to fill this out if you are
right.
planting your garden, building a shade.
And I don't know if, obviously that application will have an approval, probably a legislative approval, but then we can just change the application as necessary.
Yeah.
Because honestly, we're probably gonna be revisiting it once a month here for the first 6 months.
Yeah.
And
That
then
makes
we
sense,
can
yeah.
just get this in place and work on that.
That makes sense.
So
Okay.
I'm gonna make a suggestion because I don't want the recorder to run past an hour because it's too hard to upload. So it is
Are we done with this
five
little
oh
thing?
six. No, we'll go, let's just stop here at 5:06. I'm gonna turn the recorder off, let's take a 5-minute break. If everyone's okay, and then we can come back and pick up where we left off.
And Erin, did we in fact finish this document?
I got one more question. Yeah.
Or do you wanna do it right now?
I got one question. Okay, so Anne has, this remedy always stumps me, who will charge a Class B misdemeanor? And I totally agree. I don't know who's gonna do it. So, I see that it is common that it is a Class B misdemeanor if people fail to comply with building code stuff. That is a very common remedy. We don't have that enforcement mechanism right now. We do have the ability to assess fines. We do have the ability to go red tag something. So do we take that out and keep it in the back burner until we've got better enforcement?
I think at that point, you're turning it over to your attorney. So the building official would turn this case over. Here, we've done all these steps. We're now turning it over to our town attorney to.
And then, okay, so everybody's heard me say this before. So then, we turn it over to our attorney, he or she writes a letter, the person doesn't comply, we have no way to cite them, we don't have a justice court, we don't have an appeal court, we don't have anything. Class C misdemeanors, until we have that court system set up to back us up, is just one more thing that people say, oh, well, you put this in here, but it doesn't apply, you can't, the town's not doing its job. I mean,
Get rid
it's
of
just,
it, let's just fine them.
yep, that's,
And I just found out if people don't pay their fines, we can tack it onto their property taxes.
yep, and that's
As a
easy.
lien.
You just sue it, put a judgment on it, and it gets paid off.
And then
they
that is
sell.
a real,
Yeah,
that's real.
yeah.
Now our job is getting good.
I lied. One last thing, we talked about time limits for how long a building permit's good for. I'm gonna get with Kristen to kind of do like the standard, and then I think that needs to be built in too, and then that'll be like on the building permit as they're issued.
International building code is 6 months. At the county, we do a year, because 6 months is pretty darn short. And as long as people haven't abandoned the project, they're still vested. So let's say it takes them 3 years. It's owner builder, they're slowly working on it. We'll allow them to stay vested.
As long
If-
as they're
if
working
it's
on
high,
it.
that
or-
gets-
In order to, sorry.
Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, so I was under the impression that once you obtained a building permit, you had to start construction in a year. But completion of a construction is a completely different story.
We just want, maybe we add this to the definitions of, project abandonment, where
Okay.
they have not made any progress in a year, then you have to go back and have them tear it out.
Okay,
Okay, I'm gonna take a break for 5 minutes, 5:09. Let's break. I'm turning off the recorder.
Craig, can you mute us, just so
the audience doesn't have to hear our shuffling.
Are we ready?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm turning the recorder on. This is round 2. It's 5:16 PM. We are in the middle of the joint planning and zoning and Bluff Town Council meeting. This is March 20th, 2025. No one's left. We're all still standing, so, all right.
Real fast, I do see that Jen has her hand raised. I just want to make sure, maybe I missed it, but I want to make sure we capture her.
Nope, you didn't miss it, I raised it during the break. I was just on the website, and it already states when you need a land use plan or a building permit on the website. It does not state anything about the building having electricity or plumbing. It's located on the planning and zoning forms under the flow chart.
Okay, thank you.
And it's possible, Jennifer, we would be tweaking a little bit of that as we find out what each of the officials will be doing, so, but you're right, it's already listed.
Okay, any other comments or suggestions before we move off of that to the number 2, which is the review and discussion of modifications to Bluff's fee schedule?
I just have a comment that I really like, the little flow charts and the, whatever you call those, things that show what you need as a citizen. I'm thinking as a person coming to our website, those should just be like real clear and like, who do I contact, what do I do? So that the more accessible those are and easy to read, I think will help with compliance. Yeah.
And I think that, I think we all probably agree that's a good idea, and it's certainly one of those projects that Erin has talked about for the intern.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, as far as like an overview,
Yeah.
I like the ones that they've made.
So anything else, or do we move to the master fee schedule?
I want to say how impressive it is that this ordinance has come together as quickly as it has, so well
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
Erin,
Good job,
Ann,
team.
Kristen.
Go team, go.
Amanda, Marcia, you guys are killing it. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'll say is that I'll take all the notes from today. Chris and I will continue to work together, and then my hope is that that town council has a final draft to really look at by the end of next week, so then it could be approved on Tuesday.
Yeah, my goal is we approve everything on April Fool's Day.
Okay.
Let's get it done. So Erin, do you want to take this and explain what we currently have and what we're adding?
Yes. So as a reminder to the public listening, we are taking written public comment until Friday, March 28th at 5 p.m. The first page in blue, which is on the town website, is our current fee schedule. And then we move down into some of the proposed changes. Definitely from the public, we are looking for feedback on animal licensure. We're not there yet, but kind of in the works, potentially in the works. We have some airport stuff, and then on to the building permit stuff. So as presented to town council on Tuesday, but tying into our discussion earlier, option A ties into the state code, which ties into a lot, and is very similar to, if not exactly the same as Blanding, Monticello, and Moab. However, as proposed by our new permit technician, option B really simplifies the process, and there are fewer calculations, it would be easier for applicants to be able to estimate their costs. So that's what's distilled down in option B. There are a couple things that didn't move down just because I copied and pasted from their proposal, but do we want to charge for certificate of occupancy? Do we have other things that are not spelled out? How do we want to handle those? Utah building code, that is required 1%. We've got a solar permit in here for $750 per array. Do we like that? Do we not like that? Should be based on array.
I'm curious about that. Because I don't know the price it is to put in an array, and is that cheaper than what it would be in option A because of the price per project, like project cost? Or is it easier just to make it a one?
Most your home abode, like, let's take Nentina's, for example, you know, there's gonna be 40,000-ish. I don't know for sure, but ish. And so that would put it into the 2,000 mark for a building permit if you go with that first option. The reason why it's so much cheaper is because there's not that much to inspect. You're inspecting footings to make sure it doesn't blow away, and you're inspecting the electrical wire.
So my question was, if we want to encourage solar in town, like, that doesn't encourage anybody to put it on their roof or anywhere, like if it's, let's see, what did we decide? If it's on the roof, they still need one. It's just on the ground that, then you need a land use clearance.
For someone who's solar ignorant, what is the definition of array?
It's
Like,
The-
what,
basically how many panels can you get on one structural system?
so let's take my house, for example. We had 8 panels put on our house. If I wanna put 8 more panels on my house, am I paying a second array? Or is it because it's everything? That's what I'm just curious, like, that, the definition of array gets
Might need
weird
to
to me
define
when
Yeah, I think
you're talking about like a roof.
But it would be, because it would take the inspection again. And that's why I say, do we want?
Right, right.
Do we want that? Do we want to encourage solar, or?
So what if, and I had the same question Brian had, what's
Yeah.
an array? Is it Desert Rose?
That's an
Or-
array?
or- garage,
That's
you know.
several arrays.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what if, and I like Blue's comment that, do we want to encourage it? So what if we just had a very small fee for the permit part for solar? And then if it required, and then build in, which is kind of a pain, but maybe if this is the cost of 1 inspection or 2 inspections, so that you charge by the inspection that
okay.
you have to have. But that we keep the permit cost low, so that people are encouraged, but they still have to get the inspection. Because I can see if we don't charge for a permit, it's gonna be very hard to do the inspection. And then we're gonna have somebody like my husband putting up the solar panel himself that is not safe. So, I mean, I can see
Wait,
this
where's that?
coming.
Yeah.
So a little bit about this fee schedule. First of all, I hate the UBC's very complicated system. These are very comparable summaries grouped together, lumped together. So that 65 an hour isn't really covering the cost of what it takes for Corey to drive down here, do an inspection, and drive home. That's 3 hours. And so the permit fee is what offsets those costs to help pay Corey and I to make it worth our while. So when you look at it, $65 per inspection, take that with the caveat that the permit fee is covering a lot of that extra actual cost. And so you could make solar permits a lot cheaper, but just know that that might mean that town is eating some of those costs. Right now, we have about 3 applicants a year for solar.
So when Corey comes down, do we pay him each time?
So we're flat rated, so altogether, I think this is open knowledge, altogether, we're 18,000 a year.
Yeah,
between the
and
two of
so for the inspections, I assume he'll have a few together or whatever, and that's part of his monthly fee, is that he gets paid to come
And
down.
like during the winter, it's gonna drop off, during the summer, he's gonna be overwhelmed.
But so I don't quite understand the thing about the permits then, because we don't pay anymore, so we just don't collect anymore.
So how we based our fee, our salary, our part-time salary, was on this fee schedule.
Right, on what would
So
cover
if
it.
you lowered those costs, that's fine, but that means town might have to pick up some of the slack on their end.
Mhm.
So, but we can sort of pick and choose then which aspects of the permitting we want to cover the load of the cost of you guys, and if it, so that's a choice that we
We'd
make,
rather
right?
put it on commercial, for
So
example,
there's,
than
let's say we
someone's,
have
yeah.
those 3 solar permits a year at $750 plus the inspections.
Yeah.
That's roughly $3,000.
Mhm.
So that's 3,000 of your budget of the 18.
And what worries me is that people will say, well, it's already not very, user-friendly for getting your money back, and then if you have to pay another $750 for, just like you say, a little array on a house, or you put a little bit out to run a pump or something, or you do a whole big commercial one. So the big commercial ones, would you wanna charge him $750 for every one of those rows?
When I think solar, I don't think like I have a solar panel running a sump pump, let's say. That's more of a homemade camper style solar system.
But like
I'm
the-
talking like you're installing
Yep.
a system on your roof. You're installing a system out in your yard.
But regardless of size, so like, as long as it's one installation, then it's one charge of $750, is that what you would assume with this? Because no matter if it's a little thing on a house or a big thing on a commercial.
Well, no, it says $750 per array. An array, you said, is one holder.
One structural
One
system.
holder, okay.
So then
So-
like the ones that are out on the west side town, would be maybe 5, so 5 times $750 is what you would wanna charge for that.
Okay, and so if we're worried, do we say commercial enterprise, yes, residential, less, or do, in other words, you're right, it's a lot, but is it a lot in the scheme of a commercial building is putting in a solar system to run a commercial enterprise?
Well, it's just not very supportive
It's
of solar.
sort of
I don't know.
gone up
I'm
where-
not saying yes or no.
I
I'm
would say a
saying-
lot of your home systems to support a home right now are gonna be between 50 and 65,000. If you don't have $750 for an inspector to come out and look at that, then you probably shouldn't be starting.
I see that Jen has her hand raised.
So if we're thinking about this to cover inspection costs, would it make sense to charge a $750 fee per inspection? So therefore, if there's someone like Armor or something like that, and they have their array poles and structures all ready to go, and it only takes one inspection to cover all 5 of them, or 50 of them, or however many it is, they pay a $750 fee. If they put, like Brian said, year 1, they put one array on their roof, and then year 2, they decide they need another, which has to have an additional inspection, could then you assess another array inspection fee? That way you're not penalizing people for trying to maximize the amount of solar they're getting at once, because one inspector is gonna be able to come down and look at those all at the same time. And you're not necessarily selling yourself short on collecting fees to pay for your inspectors.
Again, the permit fee does not include the inspections. So this would be $750 is your base fee. And we could just do it for any size solar is, if you want to lessen it, any size solar is $500. And then based on your inspections, it's $65 on top of that. But that's why I preface this with, understand that that permit fee is covering a lot of the actual cost. It's, that $65 per inspection is not covering
Per
the
hour,
actual cost.
65 per hour, per
No,
inspection.
it's
per
65
inspection.
per
Okay,
inspection.
okay, well, it
Plan
said,
reviews are 65 an hour.
sorry, I read it wrong, okay, gotcha.
And I'm,
So I kind of like that idea, Kristen, where you have a $750
No matter
per
what.
solar fee. If you're gonna put in a big solar field like Armor is right now, sorry, I'm not supposed to use names. If you're gonna put a large installation of solar in there, you pay $750. If you're gonna pay a house, put a house, you're gonna pay $750. But your inspection fees maybe then are adjusted to address that as well. I don't know. I kind of agree with Lou that we don't want to discourage people from installing solar when we can.
and I'm doing some research online, and I would say the average solar permit fees, I mean, granted, we have longer inspection distances, but if we're trying to cover that, but solar permit fees tend to be between 300 and 500 max. So it does, 750 does seem a little high.
Well, if we're obviously all balking at this, let's throw out a number.
500.
Well, and
Do
I
have
say,
40.
what does it cost us that, so you're gonna put a solar field out in your yard? So you bring it to land use clearance, planning and zoning, they say, oh, do you have your 15-foot setbacks? Yep, I do. And then the inspector comes to see if you did it right. So why does that cost the town $750? And I'm not concerned for myself because we've already got ours in, but I just don't see that that is a cost of the town and we're supposed to only charge what it would cost the town. But I would be discouraged if there was another.
So let's break this down. Kristen, how long would it take you to review the permit application for solar?
I mean, it's probably gonna take me an hour and it's gonna take Corey an hour. By
Okay.
the time we talk to him and get all the paperwork and blah, 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 he looks at the plans, checks them off, we give him a building permit. That's 2 hours of our time. And then, you know, to do the actual inspections, you're gonna
Right.
have 2 different
Still,
inspections.
yeah, yeah.
So
Still-
that's gonna be another 6 hours on Corey's time.
But those get paid for.
And to confirm, for the inspection, the 65, that's per inspection or per hour?
Per inspection.
Per inspection, okay.
That's what I-
So I say like $100. Say, you
But
know,
we have
you've
to
got.
cover their time.
Per person. And the way we do
But
our
how much
fees,
time?
there's a couple different models. The model Corey and I like is you just have everybody, they pay for everything right up front, and they're covered through the life of the project. So we don't have a separate certificate of occupancy, we don't have a separate plan review, because trying to go back, and we talked about this, I've never seen us get burned. So usually what we do is people submit it, we do a plan review, and we assess the fees, and then we charge them. They pay that before we grant them their building permit. I haven't been burned yet. Now, could we do the plan review and they say, never mind, I don't wanna do this? Yeah, but I think those are few and far between. And then we have them pay once, we're not nickel and dime people, they pay one time, and it's covered. The only time that we would come back is if somebody keeps failing an inspection. And we have to go back 4 or 5 times and they keep failing. Then we would probably say, hey, if they fail once, we'll give them like a freebie. But if they just keep failing over and over, we're like, you owe us removing inspections.
So perhaps the way to look at this is, I don't know that 100 is enough. We all know 750 doesn't feel comfortable. And pick a number of 250 per residential, 300 per commercial, or some such number like that, that says we want proper timing and inspection to cover the people that work so hard to make this happen, but we want it affordable for the developer.
And per project, I think.
Per
Because, like,
project,
we
as
don't want
long
to
as-
be
yeah.
looked at as not solar supportive.
Right.
You know, we've all said we want to
Well,
support
yeah,
solar.
because we talk about at P and Z looking at a alternative energy
Right.
plan.
So it's
to-
part of our general plan that we want
Yeah.
solar and alternative stuff, so then to charge people to do it seems kind of
Yeah.
counterintuitive.
No, I do
Well,
want to
so-
charge people, but I'm sorry, go ahead, Ann.
I was just gonna say, you could make that argument about any permit fee that we're paying, we're charging. So I wanna build a house, why do I have to give you money? If I wanna put up a garage, why do I have to give you money? I think it makes sense to split it between residential and commercial and come up with something that feels comfortable. But I don't buy the argument that we're gonna look unfriendly to people if we charge a building permit fee that's
No.
reasonable. Same
Agreed.
thing with solar.
I agree.
The reasonableness is the test.
Jen?
I don't have a problem with the price, I have a problem with the per array. I think if somebody's got it organized and ready to go all at the same time and, go, you know, just looking at one of the solar projects that's under installation right now, if we're going per post, to me, that would be 3 times that they were being charged for one project. So I don't understand why we couldn't just charge them $750 if it was all ready to go and be inspected at the same time.
Per project.
Yeah, which is, yeah. the
Per
way-
project,
per
not
project.
per array. That's my beef, is why are we doing it per array? If they're all ready to go at the same time, then I think that's, you know, that's one inspection.
And I think the technical term they use is per system. If we-
Oh, per system, okay.
But you could,
Yeah, because I was gonna say per array wouldn't address Brian's question, because if you put that on your house this year, and in 3 years you wanna add to it, do you have to get
Right.
another
Yeah, that's
permit?
right. We'll have
Or are
to
you
get it.
hooking
That's
into
what I
the
was
same
sort of-
system?
Is that,
So
I
let's,
think this area could use some work, and we probably can look at some of the other areas to keep us moving along.
Yeah.
And then try to come up with. yeah,
My
go-
last question is, does this cover really big, like, we're talking
solar farms,
solar farms?
That's gonna be a different.
Yeah, solar
land use
farm is-
Sort of operation.
Okay.
sort of a
but
commercial.
That's
how does it
exactly-
show
That
up
will
here?
probably based on the
Commercial.
commercial
yeah.
fee
So-
schedule.
Really, we just need $1 million project a year in Bluff.
Are you paying
Cover
for
you
it?
guys?
I'm paying for it.
All right.
So, going back
That's
to,
Walmart
let's make
farm.
sure when we get back to solar, either we put a stipulation in here that it doesn't include solar farms, or somewhere in our document somewhere, this is not covered.
but at
Uh,
what point you
please.
call it a solar farm compared to a
Well,
project?
More
there's no
than
building
X.
attached to it.
Right, when
There's
its
no
purpose
hotel,
is,
there's no house.
It's just for energy production
Yeah.
to the grid,
Right.
to sell, for the purpose
for
of
intent, yeah,
selling.
the intent of the arrays.
For,
Or system.
So it just
energy
needs a-
production.
Yeah, it needs
Yeah.
something in there to say that'd be a separate permit.
Well, and I think that discussion on when it's the solar production can move down and hold off on talking about till we get further in the agenda, where I've raised the question about the ordinance for solar and energy production, because that would be a separate defining ordinance.
But it just needs something in here so that it's not assumed when you're trying to enforce this that it's different.
Yeah.
If we want it different.
Maybe just say for self-sustainability. Under
Amanda's
solar
adding comments,
permit,
right?
solar
Please.
permit.
What do I? Or are you still in that section adding?
Private.
I saw you per system
Private.
considering expansion fees.
Yeah, I can.
All right.
But Malia had her hand up. so-
Well, I was gonna say, currently we're approving them through LUCs, but Ann addressed that when she said that we'll talk about it with a separate solar ordinance, because that'll say how we're approving them and if it's going to planning and zoning or if it's going to the building official. I don't care who it goes to, just as long as it's spelled out. Because
Wouldn't-
currently I have no clue what I'm looking at, I'm like, okay.
Wouldn't that also include, like, if it does have to go through land use too, would also include a land use fee.
Right.
Permit fee, so then you're talking about another
Another
$200, so,
200 on
I
it.
know that's part of the next conversation.
Right.
And it's
Streamlining
not a
that
land
is-
use, you don't need a land use if you're on the roof. You just need the building permit.
Right?
Because you're not
True.
doing a structure or a land change.
So I think we've answered the question of, we just want it separate from residential, commercial, and not power generation, just running your business or your home, and lower the
Yeah.
price from $750 to something doable, and per project. So those are all the corrections we made, right?
And it'd be residential and commercial, we were trying to decide how to label that, that is better than just private, I think
Yeah.
it's commercial, residential or commercial projects. Or I don't know, what did you say, self,
For self-sustainability.
There's a name, I'll think of what it's called.
Couple more things here. So this moves into land use clearances.
Yeah.
If we're not gonna issue those anymore and it all goes through a building permit process, do we need it in here? I think I would kind of recommend that unless we're gonna do something in the next week to get rid of that we keep it so we can until we get until we get an administrator. But I don't know.
Do keep land use clearance permit?
I don't know.
I think you need to.
It'd stay there and then.
We don't have to
It
use it if
shouldn't be
it's there,
used.
Yeah.
but
It
if
doesn't
we do
get
decide we
used, but
need
if
it,
it's,
That's
because
exactly
we
right.
have one on our next agenda.
if we need
Yeah.
it,
But
we
I
use
still
it,
think
if
you
we
need
don't.
the land use clearance so that that is approved by planning and zoning, that knows the zones and knows the,
We could still approve it without it being a separate permit. I mean, because it
Could
could
be a
still be
part
something
of
that the
the-
building department and us work together on, but it doesn't have to be a land use clearance that is a separate thing. It can be that we also are reviewing certain aspects of the application and
Yeah,
the building
let's-
official is doing other aspects
Let's
of it.
leave it. I think this is probably gonna be dissolved down the line, but it might take us a year to get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, I agree.
I do have, given the variance and zoning text amendments, those are much more administrative. We're doing a lot of work on those. Proposed recommendations to increase. We've got an excavation permit. I think it was-
vacation,
Sorry, thank you. I think that was already in there. I don't think that was added. I don't
And
have
what
anything
does
for
that
address
mean?
application. I don't know if we want to add that or not.
What does that mean if you're doing a public right of way?
I think this was in, so this was in the original master fee schedule. I just don't think we have that permit developed yet.
But what would it be, for
Yeah,
an
what is it?
example?
This is a right of way, like if you're getting let's say you're attaching it to UDOT, and
So
you
you-
get an apron off of UDOT.
Okay.
So you'd have to apply with UDOT. You'd also have to apply with us. I think there's a simpler addition down the road. That's something.
Because
Wait,
like, yeah,
We just changed that.
because like we had to do one
It's
to
an
go into the laundromat, that's
Right.
our apron, but how would the town be involved?
And that's personal opinion, I don't think that should be on the list at all. I mean, I move a lot of dirt every year, so if you're like, well, it's 1 ton of dirt, I'm like, well, I do that in a week.
And in our new,
So maybe we need to define what is excavating. We don't have any excavation permits with the county.
and that was a big deal for us a couple of years ago. We saw it, we had someone moving a bunch of dirt in town, so P and Z did a discussion during a couple of meetings of, do we need moving dirt permits? And we got feedback right away, no, we don't. Well, people got mad at us, and it's like, don't get mad at us, help us figure this out, let's talk. And the talk turned out to be, skip it. We don't want to care if someone's just moving some dirt around. If they're in the roadways, then road takes over. We don't. So I don't think you need that. However, what I did put on my notes was, you talk about demolition. We talk about demolition in the new building code. There was something about removing stuff, and that we have not had before. And is that a permit? Hi, I want to take down the old such and such building. Do I need a permit, and how much is
So
it?
I had a big debate with Monticello City about this. Demolition work for residential, as I read the Utah State Code, you do not need a permit to demo residential. If you are demoing public buildings is where I think it becomes applicable. So that would be anything that's like state or quasi-state or town or quasi-town. So a school, a clinic, a library, a fire station. But as far as private, even in the commercial sector,
Okay.
the way I read the Utah State Code, no.
Okay, because we don't necessarily want it.
But
After our
public
discussion.
entities, publicly owned entities, it seems like they do.
So if something, heaven forbid, doesn't work out and the town says, get rid of the old school, they need to come to us and get a permit, or to you, and get a permit for demolition. Therefore, we need a fee for a demolition permit, which should be
And I'll have
minor.
to do a little more research on that. There is something you have to file with the state, because it goes through, air quality. So it goes through.
Ah.
See,
So
and
it's not
that's
so much
Right,
the
it's about-
demolition part of it, it's the
Ah.
No, it's the-
environmental quality.
But
Right,
there's
because you're
this-
not,
I-
because that's what
One-
came, yeah.
One reason I had it as a question is because, as we know, we have a fair number of abandoned mobile home, modular homes, where the asbestos is now showing and blowing off
Yeah.
into the neighborhoods. It would be nice to have a mechanism so that when somebody's going to move one of those, rather than doing it in the dark of the night, so that nobody can say, this is too old for you to be moving this way.
Right.
And I'll tell you, I have this fear that somebody's gonna haul one of those off in the middle of the night, it's gonna fall apart on the highway, and you're
Yeah.
gonna have asbestos all over bejesus. And so I would like to have us have a discussion about, what is that law that says if it's this old?
Middle of the night works really well.
I know
It's
there
just
are-
like you wake up and you're like, ah.
It wasn't my property.
Yeah.
I didn't own it yet.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, there are some people in this room that have benefited from the middle of the night. However, I have a health and safety concern with that.
Sure.
And I think we
Well, I
should look
definitely
at
think
that
that
age.
demolition down miles of highway is.
To answer the age, I think it's 1975. We looked this
Yeah.
up when we were doing the RV ordinance.
But it depends too, if it's,
It's the age
if
of
it's
the
an RV that you just hook on with a trailer and pull away is different.
Right. We're talking
Probably
mobile
than-
home.
Okay, mobile home.
I mean, I'll
So-
double check on what the
A lot
state
of
says with
homes.
demolition permits.
But
I'm
those,
not sure if that would be filed with us or filed with.
Yeah, and that, you know, I can think of two particular mobile homes where that came up about the moving and the asbestos and whatever.
And we've got some more that are
Yeah,
targeted.
well, I look out my window and see two of them where it's all bare right now down to the insulation, which you know from the age is probably asbestos.
so one of the things that, when you all were talking about it originally, and we were talking about demos needing a permit, one of the problems that you get is the air quality, because you're knocking stuff down, so it's next door to you, somebody's just, you know, hitting it with a truck, whatever, and you've got all that dust or whatever it might be. And then they leave for a few months and then think, oh, should I clean that up? Oh, it's too expensive, because they've gotta hire the trucks and stuff to clean it up. So that's the other reason, and then the third reason is the historical preservation of stuff. So that somebody can't just buy something and knock it down that's maybe, you know, it's their private property. But those are the things that come up when you search why you have a demo permit as part of planning and zoning.
Right, so I would answer that dust is terrible, but if you don't need a permit to destroy an old house, you're gonna get dust. Hopefully what you have is a very nice neighbor who says, I'm gonna do this really quickly, we're gonna have dust for 2 days and then it's over, and everybody close your windows. I'm not saying you always do, but hopefully you do. The second one you said about cleanup is, that to me is something that has to be written into the permit. You're gonna get, or written into the law, the zoning code, that's the word I'm looking for. And the zoning code said any demolition will follow the rules of cleanup or something. I don't know how that sentence reads. And the third thing about historic, I'm the wrong person to ask, because I think you knock down old stuff. That's just my opinion.
Well, and that, some of it's covered, I mean, I think a lot of our discussion's already covered under other entities, like the Historic Society, if it's a registered building.
Right.
You know, they've already got us covered. And some of this might fall under like nuisance too.
But if they don't ask you, if they don't ask P and Z, and you ask if they have a historic designation or something, I don't know. Anyway, when I was reading it before, I haven't read it freshly, but those were the things that happened.
Is there, so moving off, knowing that that needs some work, where are we at with,
We've got some code violation stuff. This is pretty in line with what I've seen in other areas. But additional things for town council to consider regarding non-compliance for some other areas. So just say, take a look at those, see where we're at. Unless anyone has anything right now.
Short-term rental costs look good, because that would deter somebody from
Right.
illegally operating.
Thanks. Okay. All right. And then that is the bulk of kind of our joint stuff. And then I'll just double check with Kristen regarding, we're talking about doubling the cost of building permit fees if you start without. And then building code violations, this per infraction, we would want to build into the code as to when those would actually kick in, if they kick in, et cetera.
Didn't I put that?
Is that like if you don't resolve
The
infraction?
thing
Right.
is this
Right.
is.
That's
look,
like if
we
you
tried to work with
ignore-
you, we tried to
right,
work with
right.
you,
And
you're
then
not
you're
talking
like,
to
screw
us,
you.
So,
Yeah,
here you go.
Yeah. I think on one of the,
this is the backstop.
That
This is
isn't
the-
your first like.
Right,
hey,
this
we're
isn't like,
charging
hey,
$500.
You gotta change
Yeah.
that wire, here's a
Stick
$5.
after
Since
mini
you knew
carrots.
better, we
Right.
told you you should have known better,
Right.
and we continue.
You
So we'll
continue.
build that into language in the ordinance, not here.
Okay.
This just
Right.
points to, this is how much we
Yeah.
can charge you if
Yeah.
the ordinance is not followed.
right,
Okay.
If you're not listening.
Yeah, because I think I did that in the note-taking on our business license one or something that's maybe it's on the STR thing that I was looking up, and the STR was at 30 days, you've got your notice to have 30 days, but at 90, you lose it. You lose your permit or you don't get the permit kind of thing. So you've given the right windows before
Right.
things kick in. And so we just need to check those windows.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So if anybody here has a public comment they want to write, you have until the 28th, 5 o'clock.
That's for the master, that's the fee
For
On the
schedule.
fee schedule, yep.
Is there a
As an
couple,
individual, if you wish to make a comment.
going back to the previous, the building ordinance one, is there a public comment window for that?
So I had one comment on if we can
Why?
bump down to the
Is it
community
through-
center section.
It's
Oh, okay.
I think, we've waived a couple ones for a couple of the events in town, but I'm not sure we should waive it for every 501c3 that comes by, because it can definitely become like their office, basically. You can meet all you want if you're a 501c3, and I think that part needs removed.
And where, can
It
you
just
go
says-
to that?
It's
Erin, can you
it's
go?
down on facility rentals, it's the last chart. And
I
then
would
this-
recommend that potentially this is not a joint, but maybe a town council concern. Unless planning and zoning
Oh.
feels very strongly about rentals. That's my only thought,
That's
just
true.
to, yeah.
That's true. But it just says rental fees are waived for 501c3 organizations with proof of nonprofit registration, cleaning fees still apply. So
Well-
if you have a 501c3, you can just come in and do whatever.
I have two comments. I agree with Erin. I think this is a council
Yeah.
decision, since that's where that came out of. The council made that policy decision. And number two, I've never seen it abused. So nobody wants to, quite frankly, who wants to office in here? I can tell you I don't enjoy it when I'm in here, so, not for
Let's
this,
just put
for
it, let's
office.
just move it back to council.
But we can take it back to the council and
Yeah.
talk about it, Lou.
That part of
Okay.
the fee schedule.
Anybody else on the fee schedule, or should we move on? Okay, we'll move to review and discussion of planning and zoning, which I should have corrected and didn't. The request for ordinance banning idling vehicles transporting radioactive materials it should be within the town of Bluff versus application of the ordinance to all idling vehicles. We kind of got caught up on that, and to me, it makes sense that I personally have had a number of people complain about idling semis all night long outside of their home or their business, more to the point. But I think it's something we can pass and enforce. Idling for any commercial vehicle is limited to X amount of time, 5 minutes, an hour, whatever. But I do agree that we could run into a constitutional issue if we limit it to the type of transport that it is. Uranium's not okay, but gravel is okay. So I think if we're going to talk about it, we should have it be a broader idling. Amanda?
And the Planning and Zoning Commission has worked on idling ordinances in the past, and so I think generally we agree with that. We've talked through different solutions to it. I think the one thing we should talk about jointly is there's a lot of idling within town limits that are outside of the main part of town that are like a lot at the intersection west of town.
163, the bridge.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so do we want to necessarily prohibit idling there if that's like a common place that truckers know they can idle at, take a nap? I don't know.
So I think there are things called idling zones, so you can zone it so it's idling. I didn't get that deep into the discussion with Jared Beer a couple of years ago, but we could certainly look at that. I do, from a personal view, I really don't want a truck with toxic chemicals sitting anywhere on the highway for more than an emergency or necessity. But I could certainly broaden it and talk to UDOT again and talk about how we broaden it to create a zone. I know we've talked about some of the council a couple of years ago talked about, wouldn't it be nice if that piece of property that the school district owns, that turns into an idling area? You know, there were some people who were interested in, it wasn't me. But
Yeah,
there
well,
was
now there's
there-
more houses out there though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was-
where?
Like I said, it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But so do,
In front of Sand Dune Acres,
In front of
the,
Copper Cliffs.
Copper Cliffs
Yeah,
too.
Copper
in front of
Cliffs,
Copper
sorry.
Cliffs, okay.
it's kind of the front corner now where like Ann Brown and Rust, you know, some of the new houses are closer to that than was in the past. On my notes, I put, what about the difference between idling trucks and trucks that park but they leave their refrigerator units on? That is a noise complaint we used to get a lot where I used to live. We don't want to set ourselves up for that. And another one is the mention you had of because of where we are in the highway system, we're going to have all this nuclear waste decisions, or, you know, uranium coming through town. Actually is not the whole term hazardous waste. In other words, any hazardous materials, so that it's any hazardous materials we want to be wary of. And I don't know, I agree with Ann, I don't know how you delineate all that, but I just don't want to limit it to the word uranium, because there's other stuff. Then one of the things I learned we did when I lived in Glenwood Springs and was on city council, we had a train track in the middle of the town on the river with the highway. So right going through town, you had boats, cars, trucks, and trains all carrying God knows what and coming through. So the secret is you never know what's on a truck that just looks totally innocent. So the ones we know and are scared of, we got to be equally as scared of UPS, FedEx, and every other truck that comes through town.
The gas suppliers, I mean, they're all, yeah.
You know, so anyway, but yes, I think we need to figure out where and how long and how much, but use some other words.
since we have so much to do, does it make sense for me to go back and kind of work on this with maybe with Amanda? And I'll follow up with you, Dot, and get some specifics. Because I do think it's a bigger, yeah,
Just hand raised on behalf of Jen, who had her hand raised.
okay, and then we'll go to Lou.
I was just gonna say, I think after just listening to the hazardous material hauling, thing for several times in the last month, I think it's against the law for hazardous material to be hauled at night anyways. So by saying that you could have like no overnight items, then, or something like that, or a hauling, I like the hauling, idling zone, because there are places we don't want trucks driving drowsy and stuff through our area either. So I like the idle zone idea, but I think hazardous material is, it's against the law to travel with it at night.
And mine's more of a comment really, but where we live right on the highway, we used to have a lot of refrigerator trucks and things, and we would knock on their window or leave them a little note, and they don't park there anymore. They were across the highway a lot, but that goes back to, we should not take that into our own hands. We should be able to ask the deputies to come and say, leave them a little note, like this is an idle-free zone, and I like the zone idea, because they can park up on top, they can park out, you know, other places that aren't close to houses and businesses. They are noisy.
I think you need to have somewhere for them to go.
Yeah.
But
I saw it a lot on EMS, we went on a lot of truck accidents that they fell asleep, but also in emergency situations, I really feel for truckers, like, they leave their truck on the side of the road with how much money in it
yeah,
while
well,
we take them to the ER. And so we really need a zone that's not necessarily watched, but everybody knows that it's okay to park your truck there.
There's also a lot of federal regulations right now about when they have to take breaks. And like, if they get to a point and they have to take a break, they legally cannot drive any further.
But
They have
they
to
don't
park in a safe spot.
but they don't have to leave their refrigerators and their thing idling is the problem. I don't mind them parking, park
Well,
wherever, but,
I mean, let's take the pharmaceutical truck, they can't turn their refrigeration on.
yeah, so then they need to pull out of town.
I just think it makes somewhere.
Yeah, so it clearly needs work. So I'll start working on it, and I know Amanda's pretty buried right now and stuff, so I will only get to Amanda when I got something that I think might be a workable draft, so.
Something, yeah, something simple that they can come enforce, just to help us knock
There's
on those
also
windows.
Department of Transportation regulations about where they can and can't park within proximity of dwellings and highways, and so like, we can base it off of, I mean, those are real rules too. You
Yeah.
can't be within 300 feet of a house, like a hazardous material. So the 191 corridor through town, they really aren't, Department of Transportation says they can't stop there. For how long, that will be a rule.
But we can just do a map, a little loop
When we
around
no
our.
longer have a federal
Transportation
transportation.
Department, I do
Oh,
not know
that's
if that will
right.
be a rule, but at the moment, there are regulations as hazard, particular
It's a
to hazardous
free-for-all.
materials.
We had a fair number of questions this week about like, what are we doing with radioactive materials if there's a spill? And so just, I don't know that we've talked about it specifically, but the Bluff Fire Department has worked on a draft emergency operation plan. But quite honestly, the first thing the fire department would do is notify me or Erin, and we'd notify the county, who Tammy Galagas would immediately notify the state, and the state would notify.
No,
Technically, it's the
FEMA?
it's the transporter's responsibility,
Yeah,
which is like,
yeah, but when you work up the chain of
Right.
that, there may not be FEMA, it may
Oh, yeah,
stop
right,
with the
right.
state of Utah, and that's really scary.
and they'll say, hey, that's cool, guys, put some plastic over it.
no
Okay.
ocean, no FEMA, no TSA,
Plastic
no.
over it.
So I'm looking at number 4, which is a discussion of draft ordinances for jake breaking, which I tried to cull out of the noise ordinance and was totally unsuccessful. And then no parking signage information I got from UDOT. What if I just take 3 and 4 and try to put something together on those? Because I think some of the more important with planning and zoning and the town is to look at some of these other things. And those 2 I can kind of put together and get back to each group. Is everybody okay with that?
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
So Malia put together the chart so I could plug information in on enforcement. I could never have put that chart together. And I tried, I kind of tried to go through it and pull out, and most of ours luckily really do stick to civil remedies, injunctive relief, damages, both, withholding permits. There were just a couple that had the Class C remedies, the Class C misdemeanor remedies.
Erin, are you able to put that up there for us to look at?
In theory.
In theory, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'll
It just
look.
is in a different location than all of my other ones, so.
And may I tap out?
Hmm?
I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna like wave you off at the next break.
Okay.
Just a reminder, before we get started on this, we are almost at an hour on the recorder.
Oh, true, 6:04.
Yeah, we're,
Time for-
thanks, Jen, we're like at 48 minutes on this recorder, so.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Kristen.
thank you.
So 10 more typing.
Same. We'll be
Welcome
talking to you
aboard.
very, very, very soon.
So while she's pulling it up, I did remove the link to the ordinance column because the links weren't working, so just look them up online.
So why don't they work?
That's a great question. I was curious for why they didn't work because they're all like Google, or not, they're all like
They're on the website.
Chrome extension, yeah. And so I took it directly from the website and like copied the link, but it didn't connect. So I'll work on that.
Is it because they're in this shared file?
It might, well, all of us have access to the shared file, but when you clicked on it on here, it didn't
It
work.
wouldn't
So I
go
wonder if we
anywhere.
need to convert them to PDFs for posting them onto the website, and that might make it better.
Are they not PDFs?
I don't
Yeah,
know. I
they
think
should
they're
be.
Chrome, or they are PDFs, but through Google Chrome in some way. I don't know. I can work on it.
Yeah.
So Jen raised a good question. This might be a good time to take a break before we start talking about enforcement, because it is 6:06. So take a 5-minute break or whatever it ends up being. So I'm turning off this recording and it'll take 5 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
Craig, can you go ahead and mute us, please?
Virgil told me my ring looked like candy.
Can I?
Made me chew on my ring.
I was with Virgil on Tuesday morning. Good Friday.
They came here to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Just this week and next week.
Your mics are hot, folks. Your mics are hot.
He wants to play with the train.
We're lucky.
Are you ready?
We are ready.
We're lucky that everybody didn't plan it. They only shared it.
Just
Home stretch.
Okay. 6:12, I'm turning the recorder on. The recorder is on, mics are live. Okay. So we are back on the third round of Bluff Town Council and Planning and Zoning joint meeting is March 20th, 2025. We only lost one person, and that's Kristen Bushnell, but since she's an employee, that's okay. She's free to go, nobody else is.
Yeah.
All right, captive audience. So we left off with pulling up the discussion of enforcement remedies and ordinances, just taking a look at that chart. And I think that the main question had been like, what do we need for enforcement? And when I went through, we had removed a couple of the Class C misdemeanor references anyway. And so most of these are the civil actions.
So this chart still shows the off-street parking ordinance, and we voted to table that one indefinitely.
Gary, congratulations.
Right?
Share that.
I know, I'm just wondering how much time you spent before knowing that.
There you go.
Strike through. Oh, wrong one. Someone already deleted. Wait.
We have too many editors.
Too many others. Too
Too
many cooks in the
cooks,
kitchen.
too many cooks.
Okay.
My table.
Just kidding. And given that we just did that on Tuesday and this is Thursday, I didn't bother to go back and try to revise anything.
Yeah, but, I feel bad.
So it'll come out
Sorry.
now. So I'll probably just go through, once we get the building permit information and add that to this and then bring it back for everybody to approve it in their meetings. Double check, make sure that if there's a Class C that I note it, so that we can talk about whether we want to just eliminate all Class C.
I'm sorry, I missed that last sentence. You're being nice and soft, but.
I'll just go back through and make sure that I've noted all the, any Class C misdemeanor references, make sure I caught all of them,
And you're taking them
and then
out.
ask everybody for a vote to remove them from those. Malia.
To assist you, at our last planning and zoning meeting, we each, commissioner, we have our names written down and we each reviewed the ordinance that our name is next to, and we have potentially just separate pieces of paper that say what the existing enforcement is, and so we can all send those over to you, hopefully to make that easier for you.
That would be great. And then we can add in April, add the building code stuff and the permit stuff, and then we should have a complete chart to be able to post to make it easier for people to link to the individual ordinances. Amanda?
And I have an overall comment as we're looking at enforcement and making it more clear and more consistent. When I talked to the Moab planning department, generally they said they try to stick to a 30, 60, 90 schedule with enforcement issues and violations and fines and stuff. And so I think it'd be nice if we had something like that where we're fairly consistent unless there's like an emergency, but it's like first you're given like a 30-day notice, then after 30 days you're given another something, and then if another 30 days pass or 60 days, then it escalates to such and such, and after 90 days escalate. Like, it'd be nice to have some that clear escalation time process like that.
With the goal being compliance.
Yeah. the goal being giving people a lot of carrots, and then the stick comes in at 60 or 90 days.
Right? And I concur, and I think I mentioned that earlier. Both consider late fees begin at 30 days, if not paid within 30 days, and then by 90 days, you've lost your license, so
Yeah.
exactly that. You just increments of how much you get. You always want to give them a chance to fix something, but the key is what will happen if they don't, and but,
Well, that's like spills and stuff like we were talking about on the highway. If you have a spill, well, you don't have 30 days to clean it up. It's,
Right.
yeah,
those-
no, exactly, but
those
those,
kinds
yeah,
of things.
those are emergency hazard
Yeah.
things.
So if there's something like that going on, it's not
No,
this system, but most of it is.
So, Ann, would you like to go through these quickly in each, or are you saying overall, what do we see? Which would you prefer?
I would say, for starting, to continue this, if everybody from planning and zoning gave me their comment on the one that they took on, and then I can go through and look at how you could, what the steps would be to apply, like 30, 60, 90 days, or financial penalties or whatever, and then make a recommendation sometime then. After we get the building stuff up and running, end of April, first part of May, to have everybody look at it and approve a chart. And one thing I don't like is the business license ordinance enforced as provided in Utah law. I don't know what that means, as provided in Utah law. It's just to go look it up to find out if it's a monetary fine, I don't know. So I really want to do some work, but it would be helpful if planning and zoning could give me what they've done, so I don't have to duplicate it.
I looked up those Utah laws for that one, I'll send them to you. Guess what it is? Maximum of a Class B misdemeanor.
It may be helpful as well if we're talking master fees. I guess maybe we need that differentiation between master fee and penalty. So maybe we need to pull penalties out of the master fee schedule and assign them to their specific ordinance. Or if we're referencing penalties in the master fee code, then we need all of the penalties that we're already currently saying that we're assessing and putting it into the fee schedule.
I like it in the fee schedule because I like people to be able to say they got a building permit for $750 and they screwed it up for another 300, kind of thing.
So
maybe, I don't know.
Not to light a fire, but for
Yeah.
those of you who went through it, if you could send as soon as possible, whatever
I'll just-
that over, including highlighting the fees, that would, or the penalties, that would be great.
Okay,
The financial penalties.
Do you want just a quick summary right now, or do we not have time?
I think we
No.
might use the rest of it.
there's more things, but I would like to make a comment though in this, and that is the two things that come to mind mostly from this is process, meaning we can have all the penalties we want, but if there's no process to go through of who does what and when. Does a letter come from you because the mayor told you to, or we did? I don't know, I'm not answering, I'm saying, what is that step, the steps taken? So to me, enforcement is just not just what's in the ordinances, but how it's accomplished. And then the second thing was, this bit about no Class C, no criminal penalties. I agree, we don't have them right now. There's not even a jail to throw people in for those criminal penalties. So there's no court, there's no jail. However, when does it in fact become a crime to stand up and look at the mayor in the eye and go, I'm not doing that? So I'm not saying we just throw out the whole thing. We figure out the next step, which you could make the library back into the jail again that it was years ago. I'm not throwing people in jail because they forgot to put the, solar on the roof that day. I want them to be able to, I just want them to know there's a process and you can't cross the line.
And I think that's one of the things is coordinating all of these at this point, because we don't have that many on the books.
Right.
Is getting it cleaned up now and coordinated versus in 10 years, when Quinn becomes mayor, and she looks at it and goes, Dad, what were you doing on that stuff, you know? But I think that we're at a point where, yes, it will be work, but it's work that's well focused for the next round of people.
Right, okay.
Okay, so, number 6 was the discussion of a need for ordinance, that zoning, I didn't know how to word this, so I just said solar and possible other alternative energy sources, because I know from listening to planning and zoning or reading minutes, that alternative energy sources have been talked about. We have asked our attorney to work on the solar piece, and we haven't received that. And I'd like to have us have a discussion on what direction we want to take and who should be leading the charge on. Or is it something we just don't care about and we're gonna ignore for a while?
When we had talked about this in the past, I think we were interested as a planning and zoning body in making a zone overlay map that would be a signal to would-be renewable energy developers where there are lands within the town of Bluff where they could apply for a permit and they would not be necessarily met with resistance of any sort. Like, so picking areas that we feel like as a town might be appropriate for solar or wind or things like that as zones, I think was what we had discussed so far.
It is, and the only other thing I would add to that discussion would be something that's sort of come up now as we've been discussing this for the commercial and residential stuff, is a clarification of, we want you in the setbacks, et cetera. So this zoning ordinance would say, once you're comfortable in the zones, the only things you have to meet are, and just come up with those things. And maybe it's as much as some of those setbacks could be changed for solar. I'm not saying they are. Maybe we look at that. So I agree. We wanted to look at zoning for the big stuff, the solar farms, the wind farms, make sure we're ready for those, because we certainly have had them surrounding us. And then don't forget to do it for inside of town as well. Looking at the smaller projects. That's just my only comment. I like it. So now you're asking who's doing that, aren't you?
Yeah, and I'm kind of asking, is this something that planning and zoning feels is within their purview to start with?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do it.
The question I have is when it comes to, if we do the zone overlay route, we might need some like mapping help, and just wondering if there's any resources for that or like how we should go about that.
So I'm hoping with the interns that we have a resource apply that would be able to help with mapping. There also is, and I'm going to draw a blank on how this works. I think it might be through Southeastern Rural Development Agency, whatever they're,
SULOG.
under the SULOG. My recollection is there was a comment, or not a comment, a thing I listened to that they are hooked into either another group or the state that will help do mapping. But there is a resource, and I know I can narrow it down by contacting CERTA.
Okay.
But I think that between hopefully getting an intern who has mapping skills, there are several mapping things we need to have done. And I know that there's, planning and zoning is wanted, the information on the roads as well. But a bigger, so some of those projects I think are great intern maps.
Okay. Because we can probably create a silly, cheap-looking PDF in the interim.
Mhm.
But that's good to know we have a long-term solution.
Yeah, like even Google Earth, you could put
Yeah,
the town boundaries in
draw
this.
a
Yeah,
picture.
have that pop on and off for temporary for approval.
Or at least to get it discussed, so we know.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So if we're okay with moving to number 7, on the review and discussion of planning and zoning's draft recreational vehicles, parking, storage, and mobile home and recreational vehicle parks ordinance. Has planning and zoning had any feedback from our attorney on this?
No.
I have not either. So,
Where do we stand at the moment? We gave them a draft and we said we kind of like this, look at it. Is that where we stand?
Yeah.
And then you sent it to Chris as well?
yes,
Okay.
I think Chris has been sent it in more than 2 different times.
Okay.
But it clearly has not risen to the top level. So is there anything on here that we should discuss as a group before I call Chris and say, we need to have this done by X?
So I have 2 questions. It creates more enforcement issues. It's not in our strategic planning to worry about RVs. I wonder if we need to table it for a few years and like we did the parking one.
I would answer that to tell you that you're right. If it wasn't specifically mentioned in general plan, then it's not something that needs to come to the forefront. However, what I would tell you is even general plans can get old. And my meaning of that is recreational vehicles / mobile homes / tiny homes have become a way of life. And they, in fact, do impact the health, safety, and welfare of the town. Therefore, we're planning. Therefore, we're doing our job of being ready for what's coming down the pike, well, what's already here.
Yeah.
You know, what it doesn't rise to perhaps is emergency time. Hey, Chris, have it done by Tuesday. I don't think it rises to that, but I would prefer not to see it tabled. That's just an opinion.
And I think as a reminder, which I even hate to throw this out, but the general plan was created 7 years ago. So it's really overdue for an uphaul. And the general plan is really aspirational. It's a roadmap. It's not set in stone. It's not the law. So when things come up that people feel are important, we can move them to the forefront. My other concern is, quite honestly, sending something off to the attorney requires me to do something and then follow up or not follow up. And so I think that since we've started the process, let's work it through and fine tune what we want and move this. Otherwise, in 6 months, I'll be back to, oh, this never got cleaned up.
So my one comment is, I wasn't saying the general plan, but we have a strategic plan of 5 to 7 years, and it did not make it to that.
Okay.
So at the end of that strategic plan, we say, we want an ordinance on this or noise or whatever, all the other, like noise is on there, but this was not.
This falls under number 10 though, right? Preserve environmental resources, maximize open space, minimize land use hazards, understand human waste capacity and constraints. That's where I
It's
was
what?
thinking.
We can't hear you.
Number 10 in the strategic plan, understand human waste capacity constraints and maximize open space and minimize land use hazards. That's where I thought this was,
Yeah.
where this was coming in, because I too didn't understand why this was coming up at the time. But that's where I reconciled it with myself at least.
Okay.
And I think the biggest place where it fits into the strategic plan and general plan is affordable housing. And our current ordinances do not give enough clarity around, can you live in a RV in a tiny house? If so, what are the restrictions on
rules?
that? How do you need a land use clearance? Do you need a building permit, et cetera? We've had issues already with this, so I think we really need clarity for the public about affordable housing options.
Okay, and that's listed on the top here.
Okay, Erin?
So really commend what Britt and Amanda just said, because housing is definitely the big one. But I also just want to be really respectful that, we did, it was brought to town council to say, is this something that we should keep working on? And I believe town council said, yes. I don't wanna waste your guys' time. Like, that's a huge effort by planning and zoning.
But I mean, I completely understand the question is, why are we doing it? But I think you've gotten some good answers about why.
Yeah, and it's, that makes sense. And it's not wasted, even if this was tabled for a couple of years or 6 months or whatever, because it's not wasted, all that work is there. All the stuff is there and it's ready to go, but my other comment was on the chart. Let's see, it's on page 5. And this came up in a planning and zoning one when we talked about how many units could be in a mobile home park on a residential section.
Okay.
So that just needs to be taken out of there because,
Oh, yeah, I thought I took that out.
I know, I think we talked about, you added the other, because you put in the half-acre size, but that allowing 6 of those in only one house, so then you're prioritizing and discriminating, it's houses in favor of mobile homes, and so it just needs to be, it was in that far column.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's right.
But it just is still in there.
Cool.
And where was that, Luanne?
It's on page 5, it's under, there's a chart there that starts with commercial, then residential, and it's under mobile home park in the residential section. And it just says a mobile home park is 2 or more mobile homes, minimum lot size a half acre, which is all correct, but at the first draft, they were, it was allowing 6 mobile homes per acre.
Which would be 2 times 3. It would be 2, yeah.
Yeah. You know,
Do
it
the
just,
math.
it would be, yeah,
Numbers.
it would just be more than what's allowed for a house.
Yeah.
And so it would be discriminating against building a house. You can put as many mobile homes on there as you like, but you can only put one house, kind of thing. So, but anyway, I think it just didn't get deleted. And then you had a comment, Ann, about the short-term rental permits are not transferable. In that meeting that we had with Chris, he had said that about once you give a permit, you've given a permit, and it's a taking if you don't allow it unless it's abandoned and not taken care
I
of. So-
wondered about that. The permit, is Chris saying the permit goes with the land? I mean, in other words, we had the person who asked, could my son take over my STR permit? And we said, sorry, it doesn't go anywhere. You're saying Chris answered?
I'm saying he didn't answer specifically STR, he answered to like RV parks, like, can you, if you've got a non-conforming use, like the bank or whatever, as long as it's passed, so like if the bank gets sold, whoever owns the bank next doesn't have to get rid of it. They can still keep
A
that bank.
continuous use, okay.
Except that,
But-
the difference is with the short-term rental, we wrote it in as a part of the ordinance that it doesn't transfer.
Yeah,
Right, and that
I
was
thought
what
you
we
were
all-
talking about STR separate. You were talking about STR in this context.
STRs in this context of somebody passes it down or you sell a property, if you ask him, he will say it's a taking, is my opinion.
I don't think you will, because he specifically approved the language in our short-term rental.
Yeah, well, I just asked that you find out because we are getting questions.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with asking, I'm just saying that I disagree with
Right.
the statement that you believe he will do that. I believe he will not do
Right,
that.
so we have that
because he
disagreement, so we just need to ask his opinion on specifically STRs or if we need to modify
approved it.
that
And that would
ordinance.
be certainly when he gets to the point where he's going to review it. So, I mean, I think it's a fair question. Because the question I had on that was, since ordinances are fluid, and they're not meant to be stagnant, and they should adjust with the times, in writing the short-term rental ordinance, I don't recall, my memory's certainly not perfect, but I don't recall having any discussion about transferability if somebody in your family was taking it over. And of course, that gets murky, like what is family? Amanda, I think of as kind of like this younger, older child. So is Amanda family? Or my stepdaughter's family to me? I didn't adopt them, they're not blood relatives. You know, and so I
Yeah.
think it gets murky, but I think it's a fair discussion, given the nature of our community where there are family strongholds who may want to continue short-term rentals.
Yeah.
And so that was why I pushed it to P and Z, like, what's everybody thinking? But this is a good time to, you know,
I don't
ask
think
those
we're the
questions.
ones who put that in there. Did P and Z in the STR, we're not the ones who put in the no transfer.
No, it was
It
council.
was you
It
guys
was-
who put it
yeah.
in, and I think it was because you were in fact trying to limit the number of them, and therefore, they're done.
That was the
but,
purpose,
you know.
but like, as far as the family, the other thing he's told us is you can't discriminate. You cannot say that you can only do it to families and you can't do it to my friend who's, that's discrimination. So it applies across the board. You can either transfer it or you can't.
I think that's a legitimate question, is transfer or not transfer? It's twofold. First of all, does the town council want to stick by its guns and say, hey, we're done. You're done with this SDR license, you're done. Or are you open to a suggestion of ways to make it transferable, meaning it goes with the property? And therefore,
That's the
Mr. and
question.
Mrs. Smith have it, and no matter who's next, be it the Jones or Smith Jr., they get that permit. So that's the question
That's
we
the
need to
question.
clarify. Yep.
That's-
I would say that those are two of the questions. I
Yeah.
think I have other ones that relate to that, but on this, before I nag Chris about
Okay.
where he is, does anybody else have, or are there any other concerns that I should be raising? So when he's looking at this, like,
You have one here that talks about where you can park, if you can park in the street or not. You said you wanted some discussion on it. It's on section 4, standards applicable to all zones. RVs and THOWs may be parked for up to one night within town boundaries on a Class C residential street or alley.
Right, so what we were saying is, someone pulls up in an RV, no problem, they're gonna fall asleep, it's late, they need to get safe, and they pull off on the side of the road and go to sleep, great, we want that, we don't want them lost in the middle of town. So that's not a problem. What the problem is, they can't camp there and stay there, especially if they're right in front of your house or, whatever. So how do you determine that?
And that was
yeah.
Ann's question on the comment section here. And we talked about that, the difference between camping and parking.
Right.
Like if you park an RV or you park a car, or you park a van,
Right.
or you park a semi,
Yep.
whatever you park is fine if you're in a parking area. But if you're camping, you have your generator going and you have your
Yeah.
dogs tied out and your picnic going.
And that's what we were trying to avoid,
Yeah,
and
so that's where that came up, but you had a comment that you wanted to talk about it
well,
more.
I don't think it's defined enough, parking. So are we talking, should we define camping and parking?
well, that's what,
That's why it was one
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
One night was,
stopping, parking is probably defined as something like stopping in a particular place for a particular time. So, you could say parking is 24 hours, period, end of sentence, or, I don't know, I'm just saying.
yeah, up to 24 hours.
And then camping is actually using the RV for its travel
But see,
purposes.
they can do that during the day. People
Yeah,
stop at the
they
RV.
stop and they eat lunch, they're
yeah,
parked on the
use
street.
their
and
lunch,
eat
set up their,
So,
set up
I
stuff.
feel like, and this may not be where it's going, but I feel like this is that slippery slope into what do we do with people who live in campers because they have nowhere else to live? And I personally have no problem with people living in campers as long as you can do certain regulations, but I think limiting by a number of days or the definition, I feel like we're headed down a slippery slope of, I don't know what.
And you have to look, of enforcement is look back at the articles from the Salt Lake Tribune, et cetera, or the news, watching the news, is how to stop that from happening where the entire side of a park in Salt Lake, Denver, et cetera, is all RVs. The people just park for the night and then they end up staying. Or, better yet, they're living in their trailers, in their RVs, and they're staying. West Park, Imagine them circling West Park and parking. I'm not saying right or wrong, I'm saying this was the discussion. What do you want? Do you want that to become a parking space that I don't want to pay the fees for an RV park, I'll just park here for
2
a long
weeks
time.
or a
And I'll just
couple
dump it
months
right
or-
here.
Yeah, and I'm not, like I said, I don't know the answer to this, I'm just telling you where this came from, where this,
And for residents.
Fertilizer.
and many of them live in them.
Yeah, and see, that's probably where I'm gonna disagree. I'm gonna be on the other end. I don't care on that piece of it. There are too many people who are unsheltered, who need places, and if they have a vehicle they can live in, that is, and I get it, it's not a great situation for anyone. But I think, let's just leave it the way you've written it and let Chris go through it.
Okay.
I don't think one person who lived in a urban area with people living on the street in front of their house for 12 years is really a very objective person. I am very subjective to Walter. Okay,
I just wanted to, I see Jen has her hand raised.
okay, Jen?
I was just thinking that I think it might be better to address it as camping, since we just decided that we weren't going to address off-street parking.
Ooh, nice.
Good point,
Clever.
good point. But, I mean, and I agree with you, if someone's just parked because it's a safe place to park while they live in the back of their car, we had a woman do that a couple of years ago, we've had, nobody's gonna sort of kick her out, but, wait a minute, what's she doing? Is all of her stuff piled in your yard, or, and I don't know.
And definitely what we see like on Cemetery Hill is people in, nice rigs,
Yeah.
They could be at a place and they're deciding not to for the view or whatever, and they're up there for multiple days, which doesn't bother me, but I can see how it can bother
Yeah,
And it's, in the off-street,
yeah,
and the, yeah.
Your yard.
My yard, my dogs are rolling in it.
So
The
are
off-street
there other
parking,
comments that I should be sending to Chris when I say to him, take at least a look at it and tell us where we are?
okay, and I just wanted to clarify with Jen, that off-street parking ordinance was more in, requiring houses and commercial businesses to have off-street parking on their own property. It wasn't off the street as in the side of the street. That would be on-street parking.
right. And I don't know that necessarily we have any comments to ask Chris, because we're waiting to hear what we've written, so,
Okay,
I think you're safe in asking him where he stands.
perfect. I will follow up with him. Then,
You also asked if we have any F1 zones on this.
we don't, do we?
We don't.
No, not yet.
Future planning.
There could be for the
Planning.
solar, the solar stuff could be
Any what, the industrials?
F1 factory.
Factory,
industrial.
yes.
So is that part of the discussion that you're having, do you think, with, like, where do alternate energy zones go?
That would probably be a very normal answer, that it might go in F, and therefore
There's,
changing the name of a couple of them, I don't know.
Yeah.
We
okay,
haven't got,
there's one other one that's under number 3 in page 7, that 3A, let's see, 3B says it must be brought up to standards, 3A say it can continue indefinitely as long as it's not abandoned, so it, we need to take out 3B.
no,
No,
wait a
because
second,
B's about sale, right?
right,
Yeah.
And that's what he said, that you cannot,
Oh.
as long as it's not abandoned, you cannot make them change it all.
Oh, in the event of a sale.
So it does
We have
not,
that written in our,
Right.
in
yeah,
our exterior lighting ordinance, that everything must be brought up
yeah,
to
except
all
that, and that's why
standards
my
in the event
note,
of sale.
yeah, my
I'd be
note says
curious.
everything except dark sky.
Oh.
Dark sky you have to bring up to compliance, but the rest, he
Well-
said that no, you don't.
but I go back to what Ann is saying, and that is, if we write it in the ordinance, then they have to do it. They don't have to do it if it's not in the ordinance. So in other words, what we're saying is, if there's this really bad RV situation, and the person says, well, I'm not doing anything, I'm out of here, I'm just gonna sell it, and they sell it, the new owner needs to know that they're buying something that isn't up to code, and therefore must bring it to code. And the seller has to say that, or the, you know, I think
that's
that's where
what-
we were coming from.
But that was the discussion at that joint meeting when Chris was on the screen, and he said, no, once you give a permit, unless it's abandoned, they can continue on with whatever they bought.
Well, I was gonna suggest we leave it in there, because we already have flagged it back in December, saying, Chris, please look at all this.
So it's a Chris answer anyway?
Yeah,
All right,
like,
On the one that not this one.
yeah,
Because this one is,
let's have Chris tell us that then.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, you
okay.
can't have that.
okay. And that's the problem with holding these on so long, is that we forget from thing to thing, but he's got a lot of stuff, and we can't do it all at once at least.
Okay.
Okay, knowing that I'm gonna follow up with Chris, we can move to number 8, a review and discussion of amendments to the code of conduct. I realized as I was looking at stuff that we had amended some bylaws, and it got kind of odd when I looked at the website about how they were laid out. So on the code of conduct, which I can't, I think, I'm gonna go to the back of this, did we?
That one looks so much better than the one that's on the Town of Bluff website.
Yeah.
The one that's scanned in.
Yeah.
That's
but-
because I typed it up earlier this
Yeah.
It looks
So you
much better.
retyped it?
You're a bonus.
I'd like that on the record.
Yeah, I think.
Okay,
Rules
so
of procedure.
do we have notes on this? I think most of the notes came off by the time you put the.
It's
card-
because my brain was kind of like melting by the time I was done, so I made some notes. I was like, I don't know about this.
Well, I remember putting notes on the first one, but I think they were corrected, weren't they? The part about who's at the meeting and who, oh, well, whatever.
I don't know. And the one I had originally linked, if you looked at my agenda packet early on, was like the old one, so this is the new
Right,
one.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, Marcia, I think your notes were on the
There you go.
2018 one. Oh, she's got some here. Okay.
Yeah, they're still there.
There's
I
a
have
couple.
a note that I didn't put in there. On page, well, it might not be page 6, but number 1, B, persons in audience refrain from using mobile phones for the Bluff Town Council Code of Conduct for public meetings and hearings. It was public meeting and hearing decorum, and then persons in audience will silence and refrain from using mobile phones and/or pagers while a meeting is in session, with the exception of emergency personnel's mobile phones or pagers. I was wondering if that was something to keep in there, or,
So it's actually in there
reason.
because, and I'm guilty of doing this, if you're checking your phone during a meeting or a public hearing, it is part of the record what you are doing. And so anyone would be totally within their right to say,
Show
Ann,
me
can
your
you
phone."
hand your phone over and read what you just did?
Yep.
It's totally permissible.
interesting.
And it is something now that we've been recording, physically recording, somebody sees us picking up, and it's particularly a problem when some of us are in the habit from years ago of texting to somebody who's in the room something, because if Kathleen texts me and says, Ann, can you ask this question? She just posts something that's not in the record. And so when
Yep.
most of the time I do keep mine down and I don't look at it except to check the time. But I have been guilty of using it to do something.
Yeah.
And it really is impermissible. We shouldn't be doing it. And that's why
We
it's
had,
in
we
there.
had commissioners who used to text each other the answers to the next, how are you gonna vote? You know,
And
Okay.
well, we have seen instances where on the council, somebody has been texted to ask a specific question or go a specific direction. And that is just, we shouldn't be doing it. And so that's why it's in there.
Okay.
I think this also, we had cleaned up the virtual piece. That's in, somewhere in the rules or in the.
I think it was in the other one, the rule, yeah. The rule, the one where it said the mayor would be present, had to be present physically in order to, and it's like, no, but anyway, I think that's the other rules.
And Chris had written those in when we went virtual under
Right.
COVID, because there was legislation that was passed to allow virtual meetings. So previously, Utah, if I recall correctly, unless you had the presiding officer in the room and physically a quorum in the room, you could not hold an
Right.
electronic meeting. And it loosened with COVID. And I think this is probably something that's worth having
Oh, there it is,
review.
rules for electronic meetings,
Have
yeah.
him look at it like, are we compliant with these rules? Or can we virtually now, all 5 of us be out of the building?
Right,
Which has come up a couple times with particularly planning and zoning, who's meeting virtually. I don't care, but I wanna make sure we're compliant. And I don't
well,
know-
Erin, did you, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Erin, did you not tell us you prefer Zoom meetings? I got that at one of the meetings we had.
I think having the option to attend virtually is important. I do not have the ability to tell you to meet in person or virtually, but I think having the option that anyone can meet virtually is very helpful for the public and for us.
Well, of course, I mean, we've seen that
Yeah.
people come to meetings,
Yeah.
better. But frankly, planning and zoning has been moving along wonderfully online, but,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
I think it's the whole concept of if you have the person who came to us 3 weeks ago in our meeting who felt like he was moving dirt and there were questions and he just popped up and he wanted to be heard. Well, by the time he got here, if we were all virtual, there wouldn't have been anybody to open the building. There was no one here. And I think that that's the idea behind it. Somebody's an anchor and they're here. But the question is whether legally we have to have an anchor or not. And I'd like to, if we're gonna clean some of this up, I'd like to clean up, are we compliant or not?
In that, I know it's required for town meetings, you have to have an anchor. You have to have an anchor spot at your usual place of meetings is what they call it. What I don't know is if it applies to planning and zoning. But I know that we are supposed to, and there've been a couple times when people have come looking
Yeah,
and
we-
like, we're not there.
Craig Simpson was looking for us one night, and
Yeah.
so was one of our providers, one of our contractors that we worked with came looking
They
for
just
us one
come,
night,
yeah.
and it's like, well,
But
sorry.
And any rule, Lou, that applies to us under OPMA applies to all the commissions. It's across the board.
Right,
There's
so-
no
Well,
exception.
I couldn't pull it up for you right now, but it definitely says that anchor site has to be, at least one person has to be at the anchored location.
But
Well,
if,
that's what I'm saying. If that is the current state of the law, planning and zoning will have to
Have
do
to
the
do
same
it too.
thing.
right,
But let's clarify, because so much has changed since the start of COVID. I mean, we're working, and I haven't kept up with the legislation to see.
I mean, an anchor here is kind of hard. First, if you said to me, if Amanda said, okay, we're having our meeting tomorrow night, I'm out of town, so would you be the anchor? I don't have keys, I don't have, I don't have AV capacity, I don't have, so I'm not saying no, I'm just saying this is weird. We'd have to come up with a way to make this happen.
And that's why I want to ask the question,
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
still what the rule is? If it's not the rule, great, then we don't have to worry about it.
It looks-
According to OPMA,
Yeah,
I'm reading it, I'm
They're
almost there
both, they're
right now.
both
I
reading.
know.
it looks like according
You can,
to OPMA, if you pass a resolution saying you'll meet virtually, all members can then attend through electronic participation. So I guess we probably need a P and Z resolution from the town
but
council.
we have to be in
We have-
person.
We have a resolution for virtual meetings.
But does it apply to P and Z?
No, we'd have to write our own, I bet.
No, I would imagine, I think that you fall under our umbrella.
Oh, perfect.
Oh.
And I'm
I
pretty
think-
sure,
then I think
I'll
we're
run
fine.
that by Chris, but I'm pretty sure, and that's where
Okay.
Bluff Waterworks has had some issues with the state, because rightfully or wrongfully, the interpretation that's been given to BWW is, you have to do this because you're under the county, no, you don't have to because you're a special service district, blah, 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 but whatever that umbrella is, I think, maybe incorrectly, that everybody under the umbrella has the same.
A
rule.
municipality runs its
We're
government
pointing, yeah.
all
We're
the way
pointing,
down. Yeah, okay,
So,
okay.
so is there anything else that people want to run through on any of those documents before we look at what planning and zoning is recommended for their changes, or should I just?
There was one,
I would recommend that we look at telephone conferences, because they're hard, it's like, if it's an open and public meeting, are we just saying that like it's a telephone conference code that you call into, and then how do you record it, like, is it this one was just weird for me, and it's not like we do telephone conferences, so like, do we still want to include it as an option, or do we just say like, virtual is a virtually held meeting?
well, but I just saw myself thinking of a quorum on the phone. For example, Chris needs to consult with planning and zoning for a law that came into question that day or something, something more. And he says, let me talk to Amanda and Ann on the phone, kind of thing. Is that what we're talking about, phone conference as opposed to meeting? Is that separate?
I'm rating this as like a noticed meeting via telephone.
Yeah,
Because it
it
says
is.
24 hours before each meeting, the recorder is sending out information.
It feels redundant
Yeah.
with the software we're using, because people can just dial in anyway.
Okay.
So can you just call it telecommunications instead of
Yeah.
separating that stuff out?
Cool.
It's telephone.
Yeah.
Telecommunication, electronic/telecommunication meetings. Because yeah, all of the same things should apply. And then I see Jen has her hand raised.
What if it's a scenario that we are having a virtual meeting or something, and our internet goes down at the building, but we still have a phone line, and we can do a speakerphone meeting and have everybody call in?
We've had this come
That
up.
is not far-fetched and Bluff.
Yeah, and the advice we got was you have to terminate the meeting,
Yeah,
period.
Yeah.
You're done. Which we really lucked out Tuesday.
Right?
That was just like perfect timing.
was it right
Yeah.
at the end?
It
We
was-
were
We were
finished.
just
Right
kind
when
of.
you was getting bored.
Yeah,
Right when everyone wanted to go
right when
to
you
dinner.
locked the door and going.
I don't want to linger on it or anything, but I mean, just thinking about the idea of like an anchor here, we could have maybe something posted on the door with the QR codes and things like that, and information of like, something like that, like here, these are virtual, if this is closed, here's how you do it, so if somebody's here 10 minutes or 5 minutes before it starts, at least they can get some information rather than just being pissed off if they missed a meeting or whatever.
I like that.
I think you guys have noticed it really well, but we also will have some additional staff positions that maybe would lend ourselves to being here in person.
Yeah, I think that's the starting point is, where do we sit legally on this? And we would like to be as loosely virtual as possible without restrictions. But what restrictions do we have to have, if any?
I love in-person meetings when we're working hard to get things done like this. There's no question that this is a great way to be. And I will do in-person meetings if that's what it happens. But in today's day and age, when half the people we work with are also working, then I think virtual is wonderful. And we have people attend the meeting that normally wouldn't or couldn't.
I mean,
That was part of what they were trying to require, quite a few years ago. They were gonna require that everything be on YouTube, but a lot of the small towns said they didn't have the capacity to
Capacity.
be able to do it. But we do that,
Yeah,
so we
yeah, yeah.
get it on, we have our electronic meetings, that's all basically
We
close
have
to
Craig,
required.
woo, woo.
There is, I did find the state Senate bill is 125, and it just says, this bill modifies the Open and Public Meetings Act. says, this bill modifies provisions related to convening an electronic meeting, requires a public body convening an electronic meeting to provide facilities at an anchor location for the public to attend the meeting, makes exceptions to the requirement to provide facilities at an anchor location, and makes technical changes.
Okay, so the exceptions to an anchor position are,
Yeah, well, I don't have, it's,
I think that one of the exceptions was is rewrite an ordinance that
it
does
might be.
yeah, the resolution says you're not going to be here.
Yeah, it might be.
Which is why we're reviewing it, we can get some clarity from Chris on.
Good.
On that. Because we don't, yeah, so we can do that. It is 7:03.
What's
So-
left?
What we would have left would be a review to your amendments for planning and zoning, or the town, one option would be rather than doing it here, the council could review what you sent over in one of our meetings, and then say, it's fine, or would you consider these things? And then just get it done.
Would you go up a little bit? I think that you'll find that most of our corrections and suggestions were updates and technical corrections as opposed to changing our life. So it may just be as easy for you to take our suggestions, just like you just said, and read it
Yeah.
and let us know what you think. I don't think we changed it substantively.
I didn't see anything
Yeah.
substantive.
Did you add a section regarding removal? Were we talking about removal of a planning and zoning commissioner?
That's already,
No, it's in there.
It's in there. Beautiful. Okay.
yeah, everything's very straightforward, so I think you all can review it. It takes about 10 minutes to review it.
Yeah, it didn't take us.
Yeah, I wrote notes on mine on paper, so I will spare everyone and try to compare it to what you passed over.
I mean, we did simple things like the name of the organization was different on every page. So it's, we would like Town of Bluff Planning and Zoning Commission and not, or whatever.
So if everyone's okay with that, then the council will review it and just give feedback if necessary, and then we don't have to stay till 7:30.
That's really.
I think that doing this maybe every quarter or every 4 months would be a good idea. Not adding a meeting, but substituting something in.
Yeah.
Where
Well, our
we-
second meeting is listed as a work session anyway, so it works, if you guys can join us, it works really well.
So, yeah, I would say it is 7:05.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Third.
can we cross
All in
our
favor, say
motions?
aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?